Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend. Welcome to Fanfiction World with another fiction. What if Deku Ochako's new start and Kacchan redemption? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you more want video like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. This was not a day like any other. Finally, after so long, she had gathered enough money to go to her new house. Years living in an apartment where only she and her bed could fit, and where at night she could not even sleep because of the noise pollution of the city. His life had not been easy. After Shigaraki and the League of Villains were defeated, fewer and fewer evildoers appeared. Years passed, and the scarcity of crime that plagued the city was considerably noticeable. There were only a couple of villains a month who were not such a threat, so catching them became the job of the police. For the same reason, getting a superhero job was no longer the same as before, forcing her, and not only her, to look for a normal job. With so many professionals, it was even more difficult for him to find a good job that would generate good money. He was in his car, with all his things upstairs, all his life in a few suitcases and packaging. He had the music at full volume, and he sang with all his lungs. He was happy, very happy. Everything was perfect, until the day it had been sunny with a nice breeze. It was already night. She had driven a lot. The change of house also implied a change of city. She was singing at the traffic light waiting for the green, when she finally changed color, giving way to move forward. Ochako put her foot on the accelerator to resume her trip. But suddenly she felt that her whole body was loaded on her right. The pull was so strong that if it were not for the seat belt, he would have flown out of his car. By inertia, when he noticed that everything was distorted on the outside, he tried to maneuver with the steering wheel to recover his straight gear. But it was useless. Instead of controlling the vehicle, it was as if it moved more. Suddenly something crossed his face. Because of the adrenaline he already saw cloudy, and he could not notice what it was. Suddenly everything went black, and the only thing I could hear was a beep and a smell of gasoline. Like every night, Katsuki was on his way from work to his apartment. He was a well-known police officer. Since he had started there for 5 years, he had never taken a day off and always worked overtime. The day had passed slowly. That had caused his sleep and tiredness to increase like never before. Definitely this weekend, he would take a day or two to rest. He was going with the music down. He was really tired. His head hurt, and he wanted to lie down with a beer until he fell asleep. The road was empty. He hadn't seen a car since he left the police station. His cell phone rang. "Hello? Bakugo, you didn't even say goodbye, man," his boss told him, on the other end of the phone. "I looked for him to tell him I was leaving, but I couldn't find him anywhere," said the blonde as he accelerated more to get to his bed as soon as possible. "Ha ha ha, I know. I hid so I wouldn't see your ugly face. Ha ha ha," the man laughed. Katsuki's blood boiled. In all the years, he had worked hard to learn how to control his anger and compulsiveness. Having a boss like the one he had could be very stressful. "Tusk," he clicked his tongue. "Relax, calm. I was just calling you to warn you of something very important." The chief of police cleared his throat before continuing. "In a few more weeks, a lawyer will come to give a very important talk. I need you to be here no matter what, without excuses. Have I ever given them to you?" The boy smiled sideways, alluding to his good responsibility and commitment. "Exactly, ha ha ha. Next week, I won't be here. So I'll send you an email with everything you have to do in my absence. That's it. See you soon." "Goodbye, boss." And with that, he ended the call. If he was bored with lawyers' conferences, he hated them. He broke his back looking for and arresting villains and evildoers so that a guy in a suit would come and release them as if he had done nothing. His cell phone rang again. But this time it was a message. Without slowing down, he took it and began to see what that man who spent so much patience had prepared for him. With his finger, he began to lower the screen while reading. When he finished checking, he looked up, and less than a second something crossed his path. Something he couldn't take away. After the strong pull forward he felt with the crash, he could only stay there, sitting with both hands on the steering wheel and his face more surprised than ever. He could only look at the other person's vehicle, crashed into a tree and with the engine on fire. He did not know what to do. Katsuki, like never before, was getting desperate. He didn't know whether to leave or do anything about it. No one was watching. There was no one present to testify against him or anything like that. He mentally slapped himself in the face at the thought of it. As an officer and right-hand man to the chief of police, his duty was to act under the law, and he had to do the right thing. He got out of his car as best he could. His legs were shivering when he imagined how the person in the other crashed car would be. He hurried to get there when he noticed that the flames were growing. He ran to the door and tried to open it. It was stuck. He took off his jacket and tangled himself in his arm to hit the glass until it broke. Putting his hand in and taking out the door lock, he opened it. He removed the belt of the girl who was sitting in front of the wheel. Great, a girl. It wasn't that he didn't like them, but he couldn't stand them. When he got the woman out of the inside, he couldn't think. He had to take her to a hospital quickly. She was so badly injured. She had a wound on her head that was the one that worried her the most. In an act of impulsiveness, he rushed to the victim's car when it exploded, making a noise so loud that it made Katsuki's hair stand on end. He looked at the girl. Something about her was familiar. He stopped thinking about it and put her in his car as if nothing had happened. She was very light. He laid her down in the back seats and literally flew to the nearest hospital. The dream was no longer a part of him. He drove like he was in a race. No way would he let her die. His job and life would go to hell. When he arrived, he entered with the girl in his arms, cheering for a doctor, helping him and her and separating them from one sector. He was in care for a while, where he only came out with a bandage on his face due to some scratches. He approached the counter to ask about the brunette he had brought there. "Are you a relative?" the receptionist asked him. Katsuki didn't know what to answer. She knew that if she said no, they wouldn't let him know about her. But if she said yes, they would notice that they weren't because of their last names. "No, I'm the boyfriend," he said without thinking much. What did it matter? He just wanted to know if he was still alive. "We have a girl who came from a traffic accident. She is stable, but her situation left her in an induced coma. It is room 301. The girl replied behind the counter, letting him pass. He was walking around looking for the room. Shit, induced coma. It was worse than he thought. But no one knew, so he was calmer. He just hoped that the girl would wake up as soon as possible. When he stopped in front of the 301, his surprise was the biggest, seeing the name of the person who was in that room, put next to the door. Ochako Uraraka. Yura, Katsuki repeated, almost in a whisper. Now he knew where it looked familiar. He was there, staring in amazement at the little sign with the name of the girl he had hit on the road. Ochako Uraraka. Could she be the same Uraraka he knew? No, not to mention, he did not see any of those who had been his companions years ago. The world had changed, and each one had to take charge of their lives. The most logical thing would be that most of them had left the city and had looked for a job in order to survive. He stopped thinking about those things and decided to go inside. As soon as he touched the knob, a nurse arrived and interrupted him. "Hello, are you related to this person?" Katsuki almost had a heart attack. He turned around with his face thrown into a mess, his brow furrowed, his eyes white with a rage that had made him go through the fright, and showing his teeth as if he had rage. When he looked at the nurse's frightened face, he calmed down a little. Despite being afraid his boss had taught him that he had to calm down with some people, he could not blow everyone's face, or he would lock him up himself. I'm the boyfriend." "Ah, excuse your name?" asked the uniformed woman. "Bakugo Katsuki," he said curtly. "Mr. Katsuki, I could wait a moment outside. I have to go in to check Ochako. We'll let him in right away." The blonde clicked his tongue and went to sit on a row of chairs in the hallway. While the nurse was inside, the boy was mentally killing himself. He had to look for a relative of his former classmate to tell them what happened. but he did not know anything about her. He remembered when they were in Yuyui. If he was not wrong, it was the same girl he fought at the sports festival. If it was her, then she was the same girl who was all day with the four-eyed Rapidan and the idiot Deku. He remembered that time they fought. Really, for being a little round-faced girl, he gave her a good fight. After that time, he thought many times about how to ask her for a rematch. She had passed out and couldn't go on. But he really wanted to kick her ass. "Sir?" Katsuki looked at her. That nurse really bothered him. Not satisfied with almost killing him from fright when he was going to enter the room where Uraraka was. Now she interrupted him in his thoughts. "What do you want now?" The uniformed woman smiled at him. "You can come in now." Bakugo stood up and went into the room. When he took the first step inside, he was really nervous. He hoped that the brunette was not so badly injured. Bad deduction. Ochako was on a stretcher, her head bandaged and her face with scratches and the occasional wound. She noticed one of her arms bandaged, and in the other she had some needles where you could see the serum, also a mask, as if she could not breathe on her own. The girl's expression while she slept was strange. She didn't know how to explain it. He looked at her, and guilt ate him up. Shit. How could he do that? The truth. How could she get out alive? In her mind, the accident was repeated. 5 more minutes, and she would have been ashes along with the vehicle she was in. He took a chair and put it next to the bed, sat up and laid his arms on the bed, followed by his head, thinking about what he would do when she woke up. I definitely had to wake up, and he wouldn't be there at that moment. Of course not. He looked at her again. She was really bad. She didn't even want to imagine how she was in the parts covered by the blanket. What would happen if I became paraplegic? No, I couldn't be so unlucky. He looked at one of his hands, so small and now so damaged. He took one. It was frozen, and without thinking, he put his other hand on it to try to warm it. When he realized what he was doing, he removed his hand as if it were burning. He stopped suddenly and stared at her again. Stop looking at her, thought. He took the chair where he was sitting and put it in place to leave. As he left the room, the cursed nurse caught him again. "Excuse me, Mr. Bakugo. I'm going to break your face if you keep bothering me, bitch." He was really being bothered by that woman. The sick woman laughed down to her and looked at him. "I've come to talk to you about Uraraka." He noticed the blonde's look of interest. "She's in a bad way. We don't know when she'll wake up." Katsuki's blood froze. "We will take care to give you a good service. Please, if you leave us your contact number in case your girlfriend wakes up or gives indications of any progress, we would appreciate it very much." The woman continued talking. The boy shuddered when he heard the word girlfriend, but he thought about it for a moment. He didn't want to go back there. Ochako was already in the hospital, and at least she was alive, or so he thought. He thought about it for a long time, making the nurse nervous. "Hey, sir." She was interrupted. "Here, if it's not important, don't you dare call me," Bakugo said, screaming and angry, turning it around to go to rest. With everything that had happened that night, he had forgotten how physically destroyed he was. He got into his car ready to go home and never set foot in a hospital again in his life. He had his hands on the steering wheel as he thought about what had happened. He didn't want to hear that demon nurse's voice anymore. But at the same time, he wanted to be called to let him know that Uraraka had woken up or something. "Arg! Why do these things have to happen to me?" he shouted while clutching his head. He turned the keys and stepped harder than ever on the accelerator. This time without taking his eyes off the street to go home. He had to sleep and cool his thoughts. It has been years since he felt so overwhelmed. When he arrived at his apartment, he opened the door and blew up a rest table that was there with an explosion. He didn't know if he was angry, stressed, or what, but he had to get even somehow. He went to his refrigerator, pulled out a beer, and leaned back in his armchair, resting his head back and remembering Ochako in the hospital. "Fuck it," he said, erasing that image from his mind. He took a sip of the cold snack and remembered it again. His face grimaced with pity. He imagined himself there if the accident had been the other way around. In the end, it had been his fault. He was proud, but not stupid. He had been looking at the cell phone without realizing that a red light passed through the traffic light, making the girl stay in the state she was. He finished his beer and went to his bed. He had to rest. The next day I had to go to work, and no one could suspect what had happened. He turned off the light and set the alarm on his cell phone. 4 hours and 27 minutes. Only that time he had to stop tormenting himself and finally turn off his mind. 2 weeks had already passed, 15 days to be exact. It was already Friday, and like every day since that night, Katsuki finished her workday to go to the hospital as soon as possible. Hey. It can't be, said the blonde in a low voice. Where do you think you're going? Asked his boss, who was behind him. Well, I'm already done with my shift. I'm going home. And since when are you leaving after your shift? The truth doesn't bother me. It's clear that you can leave. But it seems strange to me. For days I've seen that you're leaving earlier, and last Sunday, you didn't even come to work, said the boss, with surprise and doubt in his eyes. Well, I have life, sir. Since you started working here, I never saw you leave at the time you should. You always work overtime and work on holidays. Is there anything I should know? H.M. Well, I have things to do. Let me in, I'll kill you. Bakugo was already running out of patience. Ha ha ha, oh Katsuki, how I like you, man. You're so funny. If you need anything, you can tell me. I'll help you in whatever way I want, friend. Katsuki was left thinking about the last thing his boss said to him as he said goodbye to him and walked to his car. Should he tell him what happened? The truth is that I did trust him a lot. The years working together had an effect, and despite having a only working relationship, he knew that it was more than that. He always entrusted him with the most important missions. Of course, he had a lot of trust in him. Once they even worked together in secret, making the blonde infiltrate a mafia, and thus make them fall. They really got along very well, and I felt that hiding this was lacking that great trust they had created. I stopped thinking about it when the car started. Since the day of the accident, Bakugo visited Uraraka, always after work. That was the reason why he no longer stayed. The hospital visiting hours did not run until as late as the time the police station closed. He always visited her in the hope that she would wake up to explain what happened. He was sure that if she didn't show up there in the hospital anymore, no one would know anything about the accident or about him. No one. But the very stupid man had given his information to the crazy nurse, the time he pretended to be the girl's boyfriend. Bad move. When he arrived, he got out of the car, leaving his thoughts behind, crossed the door, and only looked at the receptionist, who smiled at him and made a gesture that he could come in. Without even trying, she was flirting with him. And so they said that men were the ones who teased girls with flirting. He arrived at Ochako's room, and there she was, as always, lying down. She no longer had so many hoses and cables connected. Only one that was anchored to the pulse screen and the mask that helped her breathe. He took the usual chair and sat next to him. He didn't know why he did that. He was just going to be able to explain to Ochako what happened, why she was there. But what would happen if she spent months like this? Maybe years. What if she never woke up? That thought made his pulse race. He looked at the brunette's hand and took it like the first night. It was no longer so cold. Now it was a little warmer. He looked up without taking his hand off hers and saw her face. Her cheeks were red, like when they were classmates in Yui. Now her hair was longer, and her face was still the same, round, big, cute, pink. Wait, Linda. At that very moment he felt something move in his hand. It was such an imperceptible movement, but he was more than sure of what he felt. He stood up from the chair so quickly that he almost fell, staring in surprise at the girl on the stretcher. Yura, he said almost in a whisper. He was a little scared, so he stood firm and moved a little closer. Uraraka. He repeated a little louder, getting closer and closer. Uraraka. he said next to the stretcher. He was sure he felt her move. Curiosity was consuming him. So he approached the girl's face carefully. To see if inside her eyelids he could feel the iris of her eyes moving. Something his boss had taught him to see when someone was conscious. But when he was face to face, someone interrupted him. Can't you stand for him to wake up? Don't be a pervert. Katsuki almost blew up the building, if it weren't for his slight self-control. Courtesy of the person who drove him on his nerves the most. Oh yes, that nurse bitch was going to die very soon. How dare she talk to her like that? With such confidence. She had only been there for 15 days. Do you want me to kill you, bitch? And by the way, everyone here, Katsuki yelled, beside himself. Hee, sir, I'm sorry. The nurse coughed in an ironic tone. I should have knocked so as not to interrupt them. His face was red, as if he had seen the most compromising thing in the world. The blonde knew that woman was screwing him. Whenever he went to visit Ochako, she was there. What a nuisance, he thought. He knew that when she showed up, he had to come out. Because he had to bathe her, or clean her, or change sheets, or who knows what. It wasn't like he cared either. When the crazy woman came out, he went back in, and from the door he stared at her. He approached again, and could notice how Ochako's brow was furrowing. It was something less than a second, which alerted him like never before. He approached almost on top of her, waiting for another movement, looking at her face so closely that he could feel her breathing. Uraraka. Nothing. Uraraka. This time a little stronger, but nothing. His patience ran out. He could assure you that he saw her move and everything. That girl was playing with him. She drove him crazy, and only emitted a growl before screaming. Uraraka. He was angry. He shouted her name, making the girl move her body to settle down. And as if they were magnets, Bakugo almost reached the door of the room with a jump. Uraraka stirred in place and turned around. Ark, let your neighbor sleep, he said. Still sleeping. Katsuki didn't believe it. She finally woke up. After weeks there, she finally came out of her coma. He didn't notice it, but he was smiling, and it was a big smile. The smile turned into a grimace in anger when she saw that Ochako was no longer moving, and instead muttered incomprehensible things. She was sleeping, as if he hadn't slept enough. The blonde approached and took a slap from the brunette to stretch it. Oh, and wake up, damn it. You know how long you've kept me here waiting for you? I was angry as fuck. Fuck your self-control. That girl was going to wake up right now and listen to it. Nyaya, don't do that to me. It hurts, Ochako said, still with her eyes closed. Katsuki let go of her, and she settled down. She rubbed her eyes to open them wide. The light bothered her a lot. She felt tired and wanted to sleep. Why did they have to bother her in what she liked to do the most? He yawned, and little by little the light was not so annoying. While there would be his eyes, his cloudy vision could see more clearly. And that was when he saw it. That messy blonde hair, that frown, that grimace of permanent displeasure. And that stop I had, oh no, it was nothing more and nothing less than Bakugo. No, I'm Denki, idiot, stop playing. The boy was very serious. Denki. Was it possible? How Kaminari could have changed so much? Hell no, you're really a fool. Obviously it's me, Katsuki. That idiot Denki must already be dead for his stupidity. He raised his arms. Did he really think that he, Katsuki Bakugo, could be like Kaminari? It was clearly Bakugo. Now there was no doubt. What are you doing here? Ochako looked around. What am I doing here? You're in a hospital. Don't you notice it? But what the hell am I doing in a hospital? Uraraka was confused. She didn't understand anything. Round face. Oh yes, it was clearly kacchan. You were in a fucking coma, and you didn't want to wake up. A coma? Had you heard right? Yes, a coma, death. I didn't understand. I was in a hospital, lying on a stretcher, with Katsuki there, and that's when he caught it. Was I in a coma? How long have I been like this? When did it happen? Does that mean that my whole life has been a lie and I'm invalid? Katsuki's face fell off. Or the accident affected her brain. Or she was even crazier than the nurse. Shut up, crazy, don't scream, the blonde said, waving his hands. It was only 2 weeks ago. We had an accident and well. It was then that Ochako remembered. Her car losing its balance and crashing into something. She remembered the smell of gasoline and touched her waist, waiting for the muscle pain she would have from the pull of the crash. Katsuki's voice explaining Tofo was moving away from her hearing capacity, and she heard the same whistle from that night again. And well, just today I came, and you woke up. Bakugo finished. He looked at Uraraka and saw her with her head down and a blank stare. He imagined that she was thinking about the accident, so he tried to get her attention. But just before he could do anything, the girl uncovered. She took the sheet and pulled it off to sit on the edge of the bed ready to stand. But that made her muscles ache. And as she stepped on the floor, her legs buckled and she fell to her knees. Katsuki, seeing that, instinctively helped her to her feet. Why would she have done such a stupid thing? What are you doing, silly? You've been sleeping for 15 days. You need to exercise before you walk. Your muscles aren't suitable for this, you idiot. The boy challenged her as if she were a child. Don't talk to me like that, kacchan. I'm not a girl. I am sorry. Bakugo felt a combination of anger and shame. How could she love her life so little to dare to call him by the stupid nickname that Deku gave him when they were children? At the same time, he felt a little bad. It was his fault that she was like this, and on top of that he had the nerve to yell at him. So he avoided saying anything to him because of the nickname. Kaya, Bakugo. I was going to my new home that day. It's been 2 weeks now, shouted Ochako, while crying scandalously. Shut up, idiot. They'll think I'm doing something to you. At this date, I don't think they're still waiting for me. And I have nowhere to go. Bua-ah. Stop crying, round face. You have to stay here for a few more days. Now he hated the girls more, all screaming and squeaky. Ochako looked at Bakugo. If he had hit her, it was normal for him to be there. But 2 weeks had passed, and she didn't believe that just the day she woke up, he had gone to the hospital. Bakugo, have you been here since day one? He asked, fearlessly. Katsuki turned around so that the girl could not see his blush. No, I only came today. He lied. Oh yes, just when I woke up. Uraraka narrowed her eyes as she looked at the boy's back. She didn't believe him at all. Why are you asking me such silly questions? She yelled at him. But Ochako didn't manage to answer, since the nurse had entered the room. Seeing the girl awake, the nurse was alerted and called the doctor, forcing Bakugo to leave them alone. He knew that with how crazy that nurse was, he would tell the brunette everything. So he resigned and was willing to tell the girl that he had been there every day with her, waiting for her to wake up. When she was finally able to get back inside, Ochako was red as a tomato and Katsuki looked at her curiously. What happened to you now? Kacchan. He paused. To you. We. How long have we been dating? The girl finished. Quiye, Bakugo shouted. He had forgotten that he said that to be able to go in to see Ochako. Even worse, if the nurse told him that, maybe how many more she had told him. I think it gave me a little amnesia, too, she said, blushing. Hey, round face. We're not boyfriend and girlfriend, and we never will be. Katsuki was very red. I said that just so I could come and see you. Then why did you want to see me? Well, I had to explain what had happened. Bakugo was raising his voice little by little, and each time his eyebrows were more and more noticeable. So if you've already explained everything to me, does it mean that you won't come to see me anymore? Asked the brunette, making the boy's blush go down and his expression loosen a little. Katsuki thought about it. Now that she woke up, there was no need to come to that shit hospital anymore, or see that crazy nurse, or the flirting bitch of the receptionist. Now he could stay late again at work, but he had already gotten used to always visiting Uraraka. I don't know, he said dryly. The girl could only emit that sigh. There was a silence until Ochako interrupted him. Kacchan, my car. Where is it? Katsuki got goosebumps. What would he say? The vehicle had exploded in the accident. I think it exploded. Ha ha ha, yes of course. You exploded it with your hand, ha ha ha. The girl laughed. Bakugo didn't get the joke. Hey silly, it really exploded. In fact, with luck, I was able to get you out of there before you turned to ashes with him. The blonde finished saying, noticing how Uraraka's face was transforming from laughter to worry. It can't be, said the girl. She had been in that car all her life. When she was moving house, she had her clothes, her money, her everything. Literally, she had lost everything. Kacchan, I have nothing. He hadn't understood. But when tears began to fall from Ochako's face, he became more worried. I had everything there, Kacchan. I was moving house. I was left without money, without clothes, without a home, not even my car. I have absolutely nothing. And she covered her face. She didn't want him to see her cry. Katsuki felt that his body was not heavy, and before he realized that he was floating, he flew out of the room and the door closed. He tried to get in, but something was pushing so that it couldn't be opened. He didn't understand what had happened. At one point he was inside the room with Ochako, and suddenly he flew away. Open the fucking door if you don't want me to kick it out. The boy shouted, hitting her. You can go, Kacchan. I've already woken up. You don't need to be here. He listened from the other side. He could feel the tremor in his voice. So he stopped insisting, standing in front of the door, outside the room. Inside, the girl was in her bed, sitting, hugging her legs. Over the years, she had learned to do things float and move them without needing to touch them. So noticing that tears were falling from her eyes, she flew Katsuki out of the room, making the door close with the impulse, and levitated some things by putting them on the door to block the way. I was sad. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or anything. I didn't even know which hospital I was in. Idiot. Tomorrow I'll come to see you. You'll go to my house. Did you hear? Then you'll see what you do with your fucking life. Uraraka opened her eyes wide. Was he really Bakugo Katsuki? He heard her footsteps. He was leaving. She wanted to stop and go look for him, to see if she had really heard correctly. But her legs were bad. She didn't have the strength to walk. She sat up on the bed again, ready to float in the boy's direction, when someone knocked. Hello, Uraraka. Can you open it, please? It was the nurse. Deep down, she wanted me to be the explosive blonde. He took the things out of the door, floating them and putting them in their place, letting the girl in with a tray of food. How do you feel, Uraraka? I took advantage of coming now that your boyfriend left. I didn't want to interrupt them, hee. You know, he's a grump. I don't know how you can stand it. He almost sent me flying 1,000 times when he was here. Ochako. I let out a small chuckle, imagining that scene. Despite that, she came every day, but she never wanted to talk to me. She grimaced in disgust and looked at the brunette. Don't be jealous, haha. Despite being a bad guy, I liked him. Uraraka imagined the nurse dealing with Katsuki's temper every day and smiled. Apparently the years had changed him, and he was no longer as explosive as before. Tomorrow he would come to see her, and she was willing to ask everything calmly, not like today when she had acted like a child. He thought about the last thing he said to her. Is she jealous of Kacchan? Never in the multiverse. The nurse cleaned the room a little since Ochako, when moving the furniture, messed up a little. Tomorrow early, we will start practicing so that you can recover the strength of your body. Today you have to rest because it is already late. So eat something and sleep, he said as he left the room. Your boyfriend will also be coming, so gather strength to give him a surprise tomorrow, she said, leaning out of the door with a raised fist. Tomorrow your boyfriend will come. That phrase resonated in his head. She and Bakugo are boyfriends. Anyone who heard that would not believe it and would die of laughter. Ha! As if I could deal with someone like that, she said to herself and went to sleep. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I had a lot to do. It was 8 a.m., and Uraraka was already in the rehabilitation room, holding on to some irons with his arms, trying to walk well. Her steps were clumsy, but when no one noticed, she used her quirk to cheat. "Hey, don't think I don't notice it," the nurse said. "You must do it well, don't use your skills." "Nyaya, but I'm too clumsy," the brunette whimpered. "Ha ha ha, don't worry, it was 2 weeks. You just have to get used to your muscles. You'll see that today you will be able to walk well." Ochako thought about it. It was true. He was only in a coma for 15 days and complained. There were people who after accidents like this were left without legs or even invalids. You're right, I can do it." He cheered himself up, raising a fist in the air and smiling. Elsewhere, Katsuki was arriving at his workplace. That day, he woke up with a horrible headache. The whole normal day passed, until, just at the time he was supposed to leave, everything got out of control. "Bakugo, I need you," his boss shouted at him. Katsuki knew they had an emergency, and she had to go out to do her job. But her schedule was over, and she had told Uraraka that she would come for her the day before. "Boss, He didn't manage to finish saying when he heard the call on the radio. "There are 3 or 4, maybe 5 villains. They are destroying everything. We need reinforcements. I repeat, we need reinforcements." Arg. And it was heard no more. The blonde thought about it. This was his job, to protect people and his teammates. For this time Ochako had to wait. And without further ado, he ran to a patrol car and went to where the catastrophe was happening. It was already going to be 8 p.m. Uraraka had practiced all day. Even though she still couldn't step normal and couldn't leave the hospital, she waited for Katsuki. Usually, from what the nurse had told him, he always arrived at about 5 p.m., but this time he didn't. Where has he gone? Ochako wondered in her room. She was worried. She didn't even know why. Not counting yesterday, she had not seen the blonde for 6 years and had not heard anything from him. It wasn't like she had looked for him either. But after knowing that he was with her all those days she was in a coma, something caught on inside her. Tock tock. They knocked on the door. The brunette settled down and fixed her hair. When the door opened, the nurse appeared with her food. The girl was a little disappointed. She hoped it was someone else. "Are you hungry? I brought you mashed fish with fish. You must thank me. I stole it for you. That food they give to patients is disgusting. Yuck," the woman said. But when she looked at the brunette, she noticed her sadness. "Hey, what's wrong?" Uraraka raised his head, looked at her, and with a smile replied, "It's nothing, don't worry. Give me that fish. I'm starving, haha." The nurse handed him the tray and sat on the bed where Ochako was. "Hey, don't be like that. Surely he had something important to do. I don't think I'll focus on you here alone because yes, after all, he's your boyfriend, right?" The brunette just muttered. The uniformed woman just looked at her. She felt sorry for her. But she was sure that something had happened to Katsuki, so that he did not appear that day, even less, considering that the day before, he had told her that he would come to look for her. "Well, I have to go. Rest Uraraka," the nurse said. "And don't worry, I'm sure he'll be here tomorrow." He finished, giving him a smile. Ochako only smiled at her out of courtesy. She was sad. She hoped that Bakugo would come to see her, and perhaps even encouraged her a little, so that her recovery would be faster. She ate her food and found it very tasty. She had to thank that woman too much for serving her so well. When he finished, he settled into his bed and due to the fatigue of the day, he fell asleep in a couple of minutes. The doors of the hospital opened so wide that they almost broke. The receptionist almost reached the ceiling of fright, and the uniformed men who were there almost escaped their hearts for the same reason. A blond guy, in a police suit, all dirty and bruised, entered the premises panting, making a fuss. I don't want any excuses. I'm coming to look for Ochako Uraraka. Look for her there, quickly, if you don't want to die. The boy shouted. The receptionist, who always looked at him with flirtatious eyes, was scared this time. And we can't do that, he said, his voice trembling. Huh? Katsuki took her by the collar of her blouse and pulled her close to him. If you can't do it, then I'll force her out of here. His face was a disaster. He was angry and tired. If they didn't do what he wanted, he would blow up that hospital with him and everyone inside. Before the receptionist could say or look for anything, someone interrupted. Hey, what are you doing here? Visiting hours are long over, said the uniformed woman, whom the boy knew very well. He approached her, practically marching. The closer he got, the more afraid the nurse became. I don't give a shit. I told him I'd come today, and I never go back on my word. He yelled at him, almost spitting at him. Listen, he tried to calm him down. Even if we could make an exception, she still hasn't recovered well. She can't leave until she's discharged. Jump. There was only a snort from Bakugo before he ran off in the direction of the room of the girl he was looking for. Along the way, something caused his body to paralyze. He wanted to walk, but his body wouldn't move, his blood boiling more and more with rage. As he tried to move, the nurse stood in front of him and said, Look, there are rules that everything must abide by. Just because you come disguised as a policeman, you won't have more rights than others. She stared at him. I understand your desire to see her, but you must wait until tomorrow. Bakugo only looked at her with all the hatred in the world. Even if she was right, he felt the need to see her, or for her to know that he came looking for her. The mission in which he went with his boss and his colleagues had become complicated and lasted longer than he expected. As soon as they finished with them, he went, at almost 180 km/h, in his car to the hospital. Every time he ran into a red, his anger increased more and more. Come back tomorrow. Don't you dare do something crazy now. The nurse finished saying, and when she turned around, Katsuki was finally able to move. If you're wondering, it's my quirk. I don't usually use it much because then my body starts to hurt too. So please don't make me repeat this again. And without further ado, he left the hallway. Oh yes, now I would destroy that woman. He was about to go to his apartment when he looked at his watch. It was 3 a.m. No wonder they didn't let him see Ochako. Although he would never admit it, sometimes he was quite hen. When he got home, he blew up a resting table again. Tesk, Uraraka will pay me for all these tables, she said to herself, thinking that she was already the second to make dust in less than 3 weeks because of that girl. Practically, if he threw a booby into his bed and fell asleep in an instant, the mission had left him very tired physically. And what happened in the hospital made him more psychologically tired. The light bothered his eyes. He was still tired and wanted to continue sleeping. He took his cell phone and looked at the time, 8:30 a.m, despite the fact that the night before he did not leave the alarm on. Because that Sunday he would not go to work for anything in the world. He was already used to waking up early. Although he wanted to, he couldn't sleep anymore. So he got up and went to the shower. After showering, she got dressed, dried her hair, had breakfast, and took her car keys. That day, nothing would stop him from going to look for Uraraka, and never set foot again. Never, ever in his life. That damned hospital. Ochako was impressed. She couldn't believe what the nurse was telling her. Had Bakugo really done that? Although I didn't accept it, I was happy. She thought that he would not go anymore. That now that he had woken up and told her what had happened, he did not have the need to go see her. But arriving making a fuss at 3 a.m, she really did not believe it. I swear, I was impressed. Everything came horrible, ha ha ha. But it did make me angry. I told the brunette. I told you that maybe he had a problem, and that's why he couldn't come. And from the way I saw him, boy did he have it. Ochako laughed. After that news her face lit up, and she was ready to be able to walk well that day, so she could leave. Even if Bakugo did not arrive, she would leave that place today. The doors opened, and when she saw who it was, the receptionist wanted to hide under the furniture. Katsuki just went in. The only good thing he could rescue from the night before is that that girl wouldn't flirt with him anymore. He went straight to Uraraka's room, but when he knocked, as there was no response, he simply entered and realized that no one was there. He's in the rehabilitation room. Another nurse who was passing by told him, who, from the face he had, imagined that the whole hospital knew about the noise he had made. As I walked to the rehabilitation room, I thought about what Uraraka would say to her for not arriving yesterday. The truth was that I had nothing to repress her, nor was I under the obligation to visit her every day. And she also had a life. What the fuck? Although she never asked him for that, he went without anyone asking him. He stopped thinking about it when he saw her. She was together with the usual crazy girl, leaning on some irons, where she was supposed to be holding on to walk better. She was laughing at something the nurse told her. She no longer had that sleepy face that she remembered from the day she woke up. Her hair was loose, but this time combed. Her long hair was very good. Her face was lit up. Something had changed in her. He was so wrapped up in his thoughts when he noticed that Ochako looked at him and smiled, that smile. He felt the heat rise to his face, so he avoided Uraraka's gaze by looking to the side. He tried to calm down and think about other things as he approached her. He noticed that the nurse left. Great. Something good at last. "Kacchan," she said, cheerfully, greeting the boy. He raised his arm in greeting. That nickname still bothered him. But now he was thinking about something else. What would he say to him? He never imagined himself in that situation. After all, it is assumed that when she woke up, he would not go anymore. Round face, how do you feel? It was the first thing that came to his mind. I'm fine. I don't need to practice anymore, the brunette said, as she stood up with her arms stretched out, showing Katsuki that her muscles had gotten used to it. The blonde was a little amused by that scene. Even though he had grown up, he looked like a high school girl with her attitudes. Great. Now you can get out of this madhouse, he said with a slight, almost imperceptible smile. Yes, I'll finally be able to eat at the time I want, Yaju, the girl celebrated. I still don't know what I'll do. Bakugo noticed that his gaze changed. Boy, was he bipolar. Hey, silly, I told you you'd go to my house. Katsuki reproached him, with an angry face. Haha, I know, but I don't want to bother, the brunette said, putting a hand on the back of her neck. Nothing like that, though no. The blonde didn't know how to say it. Though no, I want to admit it, everything. All this is my fault. He finished, so quickly that Ochako didn't quite understand. Huh? He asked. Katsuki blushed, and at the same time, he did not take his angry face off, something that Uraraka found very pretty. Don't make me repeat it, deaf, he yelled at him. She laughed. That was the Bakugo she remembered, although now at least he talked to her. Ha ha ha, Kacchan. You're still the same as always, ha ha ha. Hey, don't call me like that fool in Deku, he said with a grimace on his face. The brunette's face went from laughter to a small smile, and after that she just lowered her head and looked at the ground with a sad expression. Upon noticing that, Katsuki knew that he had screwed up. He always thought that the idiot Deku and that girl would end up married, with children, living in the typical house in the suburbs, and that silly stuff. Hey, okay, I said silly. He tried to fix it and change the subject. Well, then, do you have your things ready? Today I will get you out of this hell. Yes. He just said Uraraka. Total. He had nothing to fix. Then let's go, before all these idiots infect us, the explosive boy said, taking Ochako's hand and leading her to her room to take her things and leave. The brunette looked at his hand as she walked. A slight blush was deposited on her face after that act. She was cold. He was so warm that she liked him. They arrived at his room, and he only took his clothes, inviting Bakugo to come out to dress in the only clothes he had left after the crash. She left her room, and after saying goodbye to the nurse who accompanied her all those days, they went to the car, he in the driver's seat, and she as the co-pilot. Then Bakugo, how will this be? The girl asked, putting on her seat belt. We must buy you clothes first, the blonde said dryly. You don't need kacchan. I have some clothes where I work, Ochako told him. Katsuki looked at her strangely. If she had a job, why was no one there looking for her? Where do you work? Let's get your stuff. Drive, I'll tell you how to get there. He finished, smiling at the boy. Stop smiling at me like that, idiot. You'll end up killing me, thought the blonde man. And with that, they headed to the place where Uraraka earned the money. Ochako and Katsuki were on their way to where Uraraka worked. On the way, the brunette didn't say anything. She didn't know what to say or ask. She just looked at him sometimes, without him noticing, or so she thought. Bakugo had already learned his lesson. No losing concentration on the road while driving. But there was something there that did not let him concentrate. Ochako's gaze. She did not stop looking at him, and although he tried to ignore her, he could not. She noticed how he looked at him, and many times she wanted to exploit that angel face he had to finally be able to put her mind on the trip. Keep looking at me, and I'll blow up your face. Uraraka jumped up and down with that statement. Although she hadn't seen him for years and noticed the change in the boy's patience and anger, she was still scared. And of course, after she experienced in her own flesh what he was capable of doing. Bakugo, don't be like that. I'm just seeing how much you've changed, said the brunette. Katsuki turned his face, still keeping his attention straight ahead, to look at her. I'm the shit that I am, and I say what I want. And no one will tell me what to do. Did you hear, stupid? He shouted at him with his eyes rolling. Ochako got scared and settled into her seat. She was scared. She didn't know what would happen if she stayed with him too much. Maybe he would kick her out of her house, or worse, kill her. Well, not that, because of what the nurse who took care of her in the hospital told her. He was a policeman, and he couldn't kill her. Hey Bakugo, is it true that you're a policeman? The girl asked, her eyes shining with admiration. I know. I'm a well-known police officer, the blonde man said. But that won't stop me from murdering you if you act like an idiot. A drop fell on Uraraka's head. It was as if he were reading her mind. Oh, that's great, Bakugo. I'm glad you're doing something good in your life, he said, smiling. And your round face, where do you work? The boy asked him, to break that tension they had. Well, here, right on this corner, the brunette finished saying with a smile. Katsuki stopped the car and looked at the compound in front of them. A large space with a giant LED light sign, on which you could clearly read Club Minanas, and a little further down, smaller, the phrase nightclub, something he did not like at all. He saw how Uraraka got out of the car, and begged him to get somewhere other than that. But his face changed when he saw the girl enter that enclosure. He waited for a while uncomfortably in his car. He didn't want to be seen there. It wasn't that he didn't like women, but that kind of women didn't attract his attention at all. Ochako left the place with a bag on her right arm. The blonde stared at her. She had a very big smile when she left there and got into her car. Hey, what's wrong with you? Why are you so happy? He asked, ordering him with his eyes to answer him. Kacchan, I've been rehired. Izuku, the girl exclaimed. What? Uraraka. Tu, are you a prostitute? He couldn't finish the sentence, as the brunette covered his mouth with a hand and a very angry look. Don't even say it, Bakugo. No, I'm not a prostitute. Katsuki was a little calmer, imagining that she did the makeup for the other women there, or did the cleaning, or who knows what. Obviously the tender little Uraraka he knew couldn't. And that was the end of his thoughts. Ochako opened her bag, revealing some dresses and underwear too provocative for someone like her. The blonde couldn't help but look at that and pressed the brake with his foot so hard that the sound generated by that made the girl's ears hurt. "But what's wrong with you?" the girl yelled at him and asked. "You told me you weren't one of those," the boy shouted back. "And that's what? It's the truth. I'm not a prostitute. I don't have sex with guys for money." "You're the idiot of idiots. Don't lie to me, bitch. Just look at those clothes. You are a prejudiced Bakugo. And what if it were?" Ochako began to raise her voice. "Work dignifies, and if I didn't have any other opportunity, then I would." Katsuki was silent this time. He didn't know her well. He didn't know anything about her. Not even when they were in the course to be heroes were they so close. He thought she was a certain way because of the things he heard from others. Apart from her fight at the sports festival, he had never had a normal conversation with her. He didn't know that she liked her, or what he wanted to do with his life. He didn't know anything. He didn't take his eyes off Uraraka's face. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what. He didn't want to apologize to her anymore. But he didn't want to be silent either. He just looked at her with a frown, and she did the same with him. He noticed that she moved her hand to open the car door. Obviously, she wanted to get out and get away from him. Obviously, he wouldn't even blame her. Anyone in a conscious state would do the same. But no, he couldn't let her go out in the open. He took her car, her money, her chance at a new house, and maybe a new life. Even her clothes disappeared because of him. And even worse, she had to work in it to be able to live. What kind of life had that girl led after they finished their studies to be like this? And there she could notice it. While looking into her eyes, she saw the pain and disappointment in her. She had the same look as him. So no, he couldn't leave her alone. He had to help her, and in less than a second he took her hand. "Wait." He kept looking at her. Sorry, Uraraka." She could notice how her gaze went from anger to embarrassed. What did you say?" And she changed her countenance to a less angry one, too. "Why do you make me repeat these things?" Katsuki was angry again. If he asked for forgiveness, his pride was being trampled on the ground. And to make it worse, did he want me to repeat it? Ochako noticed that change and again raised her eyebrows. It bothered her a lot that that boy yelled at her. "Look, if we're going to do this, you need to stop yelling at me like that," she said angrily. "Jim." He just let out a snort and nodded his head. "I don't like to be yelled at, it's annoying," the girl said as Katsuki began to move forward in the car. "I would never yell at you because I did, kacchan." He began to feel the blush on his face, covering it, instinctively, with his two hands. "Do you know why?" And she raised her face to look at him. "Because I respect you a lot. I have always respected you. I think you are someone incredible, Bakugo." Ochako finished saying that, and felt her face burning. So she looked down again, and put her hands on her face again. Since being freezing could perhaps calm that redness. The blonde looked at her in amazement with his eyes wider than usual. He had never thought that she believed that about him. In fact, after their fight, she thought she hated him. A slight blush appeared on her face, and she turned her head very quickly to the front. "Well, no more screaming." That was all he could say. The words didn't come out. Uraraka raised her head, still with her hands on her cheeks, and smiled at him. A small smile, which Bakugo found very cute and tender, telling her that she agreed. A couple of minutes passed in silence. The time Ochako waited for the blush to go away. "Stripper," he said without anything else. The blonde looked at her without moving his head. "Huh?" he said, not understanding. "I'm a stripper, kacchan." And, as if he were a dejavu, he pressed the brakes hard again. "Stry." He didn't finish. Ochako's face had the phrase "yell at me again, and I'll rip your balls everywhere." "Stripper?" "Yes, stripper. And if you're wondering, I only dance on stage. If someone touches me, I can break their fingers or arm just by looking at them," she said angrily. "And now that you know, you can live peacefully." And without further ado, he folded his arms. "You won't work there," the boy said, smiling. "Eh? Who says so? You?" "Ha ha ha," the girl laughed. Bakugo was not amused by the laughter. Well, yes, I won't let you work there. It's dangerous. Do you know at least how long I've been there? No, and I don't care. I said don't work there, period. Ochako smiled sideways at him. Maybe with your girlfriend or with your colleagues that will work. But not with me. I'm grown-up kacchan. I know what I'm doing, and just as you don't want me to tell you what to do, don't do it with me either. The boy continued on his way home. He wanted to get there soon, and it wasn't long. He didn't say anything to Uraraka after that. The truth is that no one had ever faced him like this. And although he never admitted it, he had liked it very much. What he didn't like, not at all, was that he talked to her about a girlfriend. He had had a girlfriend 3 years ago, but they were not compatible at all. In fact, he did not even show interest in her. He had no idea how they lasted a few months. With work, he did not have time to call her or go out with her. He was not interested in what she had done during the day. He only called her, and they had sex sometimes to take away the desire and stress. One day she called him to see each other, and he, not showing the slightest interest, ended up making his, at that time girlfriend, break up with him on the phone, telling her 1,000 things, to which he only cut her off and relaxed, knowing that he would finally have the same peace as before. She thought about Uraraka. Had she ever had a boyfriend? What would have happened to her and Deku's fool? Now that he could finally see her well and talk to her, he could tell that she was very cute and tender. And at the same time she had a shitty character, which he at least liked a little. Only his character, nothing more. He had finally arrived home. They got out of the car and went up to the apartment. Ochako was impressed. It was very big, not even compared to the little hut in which she lived before. Everything was very tidy and clean. She loved it. Kacchan, your house is very nice, she said with little stars in her eyes. Like the owner, the boy replied, leaving his vehicle keys on a table near the television. He had to buy a new rest table. Ochako settled in. The truth is that she only had a bag with a little clothes, most of which were very provocative. But among the clothes she had some shorts or skirt and a t-shirt with which she arrived at work one day. While she was checking Katsuki's apartment, he made some food. He imagined that the girl must be dead for real food. After all, in the hospital, they usually give a plain bread and a glass of unsweetened milk to survive a whole day. Hospitals are really diabolical, he thought. He made some breads with chicken, avocado, bacon and cheese and set the table, putting a couple of cups for tea and a loaf of bread in each stall. Ochako was shocked by that. It was like those photos of food she saw in magazines or restaurants that were too expensive for her. While she devoured everything, Katsuki looked at her. He had looked at her too much that day. She didn't like that. She needed to focus on her work and her things, not on nonsense. Hey, Kacchan. The brunette pushed him out of his thoughts. What will you tell me now? I just want to know, how are we going to sleep? There is only one bed. Bakugo spat out his tea, as he didn't think about it before. How stupid. But it was too late to think about that, just for tonight. And only because before he was a selfless brute, he was a knight. She would pass him the bed to rest, and he would sleep in the armchair. But not before putting a few rules, so that Uraraka would not destroy the place. While Katsuki said 1,000 things, Uraraka only nodded his head. Bakugo listed all the rules of the house. Among them, whenever something from the kitchen was used, washed, he hated clutter. Clothes could not be thrown on the floor. No visitors, etc., etc., etc. Ochako nodded her head to everything. Sometimes she also lets out an ajam. But the truth is that in her mind none of that entered. She was only focused on how the blonde moved his mouth. She managed to hear even the part of the clothes. When everything began to sound bad, she was glued watching how the boy moved his mouth. When they were younger, she never paid much attention to him. The only thing she knew about him was what Midoriya told her, that, despite not being bad at all, she saw Bakugo as the same demon. But now that they had spent a few days together, he was not as horrible as she imagined. In fact, Something about him made Ochako feel good. Was that clear to you, round face? He said, pulling her out of his thoughts. The brunette jumped out of her chair when she heard that nickname he had given her. Yes, of course, kacchan, no clothes, she said, smiling, hoping he wouldn't notice her lack of attention to everything she said. On the floor, silly, no clothes on the floor. Well, we won't have problems like that, he finished saying before getting up from his chair and going to his refrigerator to get a beer. Oh, kacchan, she asked. What, want one? And he stretched out his hand to offer him refreshments. Uraraka took it and stared at that liquid inside the bottle. It wasn't that he had never drunk, but in the place where he worked, he always saw how alcohol brought out the worst in people. So, do you like to drink a lot? He dared to ask him. He let out a curious murmur. Only when I'm thirsty. Why, not you? Are you one of those who get drunk with a drink? Ja. The boy laughed. The brunette looked at the floor, stood up from her seat, and went to sit on the apartment chair. No, don't be an idiot, he said, letting out a small smile. Katsuki hated it when she smiled. Whenever she did that, his stomach churned. I'll kill you if you keep doing that, he thought as he stared at her. Hey, let me look at me like that. You make me nervous, the brunette said, blushing. Bakugo didn't realize what she was doing until he heard her. He choked on the sip he had taken from his beer, and the heat rose to his face. Instinctively, he turned his head as fast as he could to another place, to any place where that girl couldn't see how her cheeks were flushed. I wasn't looking at you, he yelled at him. Ha ha, calm down, she said, raising her hands in front of her to calm the blonde man. You know, I haven't thanked you for all this yet. You don't have anything to be thankful for, he replied dryly. After all, you're here because of me. His brow furrowed. He hated to admit it. But yes, it was his fault. Don't say that. We can get along and have a great time together. He raised his arm with a clenched fist, encouraging the boy, and at the same time he got up from the couch to go to the refrigerator and get another beer. Katsuki watched as the girl opened the freezer to take out another bottle and wondered if it had been a good idea to offer her one. After a while, the two of them were talking happily on the couch. Well, at least Uraraka, who unlike Katsuki, who only spoke with a small smile, she spoke very loudly, and her smile did not fade from his face. Yes, they were drunk. Bakugo looked at her. He had a good tolerance, since almost every day he drank a beer or whiskey at home or in a bar. But as a while ago, his stomach was turning. On the other hand, Ochako, despite the fact that her resistance to alcohol was not so low, that night she let herself go. If the blonde was able to take care of her for so long in the hospital, clearly nothing would happen to her if she drank too much this time. And boy, did she want to do it a long time ago. After a long time, her head stopped thinking about all the things that life had taken away from her, or the bad things that had taken her dice. Katsuki saw the pink cheeks of the brunette, while laughing scandalously at something he had said. She opened her eyes, teary from so much laughter, which the boy thought were very big and pretty. No, only big ones. Kacchan, ha ha ha. You'll end up killing me, ha ha ha. He laughed loudly. Kill? After the accident, seeing Ochako bedridden, he didn't want anything to happen to her, ever again. He saw her so small and fragile that he didn't want anyone to touch her, not even himself. She knew well that there was nothing fragile about her. She made it clear to him that time she got up every time he sent her flying with an explosion. But something told her that he had to protect her. Maybe his police spirit should protect everyone, right? He couldn't stop looking at her, and she, noticing that, began to get uncomfortable. The boy's red orbs penetrated his gaze as if he wanted to read his mind. Ochako, feeling uncomfortable, stared back at him. He didn't know if it was because of too much alcohol or what. But Katsuki's image was liking him. He was no longer the explosive fool he knew. Now he liked him. He was nicer and had more tolerance. He lowered his gaze and looked at his mouth. He had the same grimace as always. Bah, that didn't surprise him. She went down a little more and could see the boy's arms. If before he had a good body, now he was well formed. He had a big back, and his arms, which had enough muscles, but not so many as to seem grotesque to him, began to rise to get behind his head, on the back of his neck to be more exact. Ah, round face. I hope you don't make me angry, or I'll blow up that big head you have. The girl, who was very blushing because of what she admired a while ago, and looked at her face. She had her eyes closed, as if she were resting. She saw how her chest inflated and deflated to the sound of her breathing. This time she felt her face burning. Why was she thinking about those things? She must have been very drunk, she thought as she finished drinking her beer. Bakugo. MH? The blonde muttered, without opening his eyes or moving from his position. The girl was going to say something, but before any word came out of her mouth, she felt something hot rise up her throat, and in less than a second her hand covered her mouth. Katsuki, hearing a small groan beside him, opened one eye, and what he saw alarmed him. Uraraka had both her hands in her mouth, covering it. She had a pleading face, and she jumped up and down a little, implying that she was about to vomit. So, as best he could, the blonde tried to get her to her feet, something useless, since Ochako had drunk so much that she staggered when she walked. In desperation, Bakugo grabbed her by the waist and ran her to the bathroom, leaving her in front of the toilet so she could regurgitate everything. Never in the world would she let her vomit up the couch or the carpet. He saw how Uraraka hugged the toilet, but he didn't let anything out. He imagined that he must be ashamed. So that he wouldn't feel bad, he crouched down next to her and only managed to caress her back from top to bottom. The brunette, feeling that, felt her heart stop. When she was sitting in front of the toilet, her head was a little lighter and her shyness took over. The first day she arrived at the house of the blonde that she had not seen for more than 6 years, and was already making a fool of herself. She felt like crying, and she didn't even know why. But feeling Katsuki's warm hands on her back calmed down a little. I'm sorry. That was the only thing he could let go, and he hugged the toilet tighter. The blonde saw how the girl shuddered and only asked her, Do you feel better? Yes, a little, thank you, kacchan, she said, turning her head towards him and smiling shyly at him. Katsuki, noticing Ochako's red cheeks, felt like grabbing them and pulling them so hard until they broke. Part of her hair was on her face because of the madness it was to take her to the bathroom so quickly. So she moved those strands with her big hands, making the brunette surprised. You must sleep. And without further ado, he helped her to her feet and took her to her room so that she could lie down. I'll leave you alone, rest. The boy finished, closing the door behind him. Uraraka, who was standing in front of the door, stared at her for a few seconds, until her body began to stagger, and she sat almost dry on Bakugo's bed, covering her face with her hands. I'm a fool. I'm sure kacchan will kick me out tomorrow, she said to herself, moving her legs and throwing herself back to fall on the bed with her arms outstretched. Stupid Uraraka, you must behave, he finished saying as he settled into bed and took one of Katsuki's shirts to wear as pajamas. Meanwhile, Bakugo, who was lying on his couch, was thinking about what he had done. Take a girl to live with him. A girl who, if it weren't for the fact that they were classmates in high school, would be a complete stranger. Although in the time they were talking while they were drinking, he felt comfortable enough with her, he had to accept that it would be a problem. And while he was thinking about it, he fell asleep. The next day, the blonde felt how the light hit his eyes, and he let out a growl. His head hurt, and he wanted to continue sleeping. He took his cell phone and barely opened one eye to see the time. But when he noticed that it was 9:35, he opened both eyes and jumped up from the couch. My boss will kill me, she said as she ran to her room to get clean underwear and some towels. But when he entered there, he saw her. She was wearing a t-shirt of his. Her eyes were closed. Obviously, she was still sleeping, but unlike when she was in a coma, Now her face was shining as she did it, as if she was finally resting well. But oh ho, she was not well covered, so the blonde managed to see part of the girl's underwear. Opening his eyes so large and feeling his face burn like never before, he took out his clothes and towels as fast as he could and went out, slamming the door shut so hard that he woke Uraraka awake. The girl opened her eyes little by little. Her body hurt and her head wanted to explode. She had the worst hangover and tried to remember what happened the night before, and the first thing that came to her mind was Katsuki's body while they were on the couch. He laughed mischievously to her and sat up on the bed, stretching as far as he could. He put on shorts he had salvaged from his work and left the room to look for Bakugo. When she went out and took a quick look, she couldn't find it anywhere. So she went to the bathroom to wash her face, turned the doorknob. But it was closed, and she could hear the sound of the water from the shower. He assumed he was bathing, so he went to the kitchen to drink water and look for something to eat. Under the cold water of the shower, Katsuki thought of new rules to live together, and one of them was not to sleep without two-piece pajamas. When suddenly he heard a song play that he would recognize anywhere. His cell phone was ringing in the living room of his house, and surely it was his boss who was calling him. He was mentally beating himself for forgetting to set the alarm the day before when he suddenly stopped listening to the music. "Hello?" He heard the voice of the brunette on the other side of the wall, and his hair stood on end. "No, it can't be." Bakugo, your voice sounds different." A man's voice said on the phone. "Haha, no, you talked to Uraraka," the girl replied. "Oh, Uraraka," the police chief on the other end of the line said, smiling mischievously. "Could you find me with Bakugo Katsuki? Kacchan is taking a shower right now. Who do I have the pleasure of talking to?" the girl said very nicely. And before the boss answered, the blonde came out of the bathroom almost breaking the door, only with a towel wrapped around his hips, and snatched the cell phone from Ochako's hands. "Sir, I'm so sorry. My cell phone went off in the night, and my alarm didn't go off," the boy said, agitated. "Jojo, it doesn't matter, Katsuki. Now I understand why you were leaving here before. If you had told me, I wouldn't have a problem leaving you with your girlfriend," the boss said, his voice boiling with his blonde blood. "Grrr, she's not my girlfriend," she yelled into the cell phone, making him move from there so he wouldn't notice that he had blushed. "I'm going there now. In 10 minutes I'll be there." And he cut off. Kacchan, don't go," the brunette said, with a puppy face. "Don't with round face. I have to go to work." Katsuki walked to his room to get dressed. "And who gave you permission to sleep in my t-shirt? Later we'll go buy you pajamas," he said before closing the door with all his strength. "But we haven't even had breakfast," Uraraka whispered, looking at the ground. When Bakugo left his room, he saw how the girl was drinking a cup of coffee in the kitchen. She was deep in thought when she raised her head to look at him, to which the blonde just turned his head and opened the door to leave. Ochako sighed and took another sip of her tea. She was alone in that large apartment, and to top it all off, Katsuki had nothing in her pantry, only powdered food and alcohol. "Nyaya, how I would like some waffles now." He was tormented. Suddenly she got up from the table and went into the room, taking out a small bag and opening the door to go to who knows where. The blonde was driving his car to work. He was angry, he was late, and he didn't even want to imagine how his boss would bother him regarding a girl who had answered his cell phone and hit her forehead while driving. When he arrived at the place where he was going, he got out of his car, and being in front of the front door, he gave a big sigh. He opened the doors and his boss threw himself at him. "Very well, little Katsuki. Now you'll tell me everything. Ha ha ha." The guy laughed as he put an arm around his back, hugging him. The blonde didn't like the idea of telling her what happened, so he omitted some parts and only told her that he had reunited with an old friend and did her the favor of letting her sleep for a few days at his house. "And well, she's a little hyperactive. That's why I answer my phone. I see you a little distressed, boy. Are you okay with that? He asked. The truth is that she gives me a headache, but I have to help her. That's why I'm a policeman, he said, downplaying it. Well, I'm going to work, he finished saying and walked to his post. It could be that finally. His boss rubbed his chin as he said those words. At the end of the day, the boy took his things and went to his car. That day, after many, he stayed late. He was leaving when he heard someone calling him. Hey, Katsuki, his boss shouted at him. What's wrong? Don't tell me that another emergency call went out. The boy said, a little stressed. No, this time I'm here to give you good news, his boss said, smiling. Your vacation begins today. Bakugo's face dropped. What? I have not asked for a vacation, he shouted, bewildered. Well, by law you must take them, and you have already accumulated a lot, he said, becoming serious. I won't take them, I refuse, he crossed his arms. Too bad I'm your boss, and you have to listen to me. I don't want to see you here for another month, his boss told him, noting his superior rank, to which the boy only accepted with a growl and shaking his head. He left the police station angry. He didn't need vacations, especially now that Uraraka was living in his house. Nor would he leave her taking care of his apartment while he went on a trip, much less take her with him. As he drove home, he stopped by to buy 2 pizzas. He was hungry, so they would have pizzas for dinner with ochako. But when he arrived, he noticed that the lights in his apartment were off. He must be sleeping, he thought. When he went upstairs, opened the door and turned on the lights, it was too quiet. Round face, he shouted, leaving his keys on the table along with the pizzas. Hey, you fool, where are you? If you don't come, I'll eat this by myself, he growled. He started looking for the girl, first in her room, then in the bathroom, then in the kitchen, and found her nowhere. He began to worry, imagining the worst of the situations, but suddenly he calmed down. I must think with a cool head. He went to his refrigerator and took out a whiskey, pouring himself half a glass and pouring some ice on it. If I were the stubborn one from Uraraka, where would I go? She wondered. Of course, he said, snapping his fingers. Silly round face, he finished saying, grimacing in disgust and taking the liquid from the dry glass to take the keys and leave his house again. He got into his car and stepped on the accelerator as hard as possible, making his tires rattle against the pavement because of how fast they were moving. He put on the car radio and went to the place where he assumed he would meet the girl. When he got there, he braked in the same way that he accelerated to start his journey and got off, walking quickly to the entrance of the place that was adorned by a large sign with LED lights that showed the word Meninas. The music resonated in his ears, and the dark light bothered his vision. He did not understand how there were guys who spent time in those places. As he entered the place, a girl approached him whom Katsuki did not even take into account, to which she stopped bothering him. He looked at the faces of all the women who crossed his path, trying to recognize one. But when he could not find her, he took a girl by the arm and turned her towards him. What do you have to offer, handsome? The woman said to him, very coquettishly. Don't play with me, bitch. Tell me, where is Uraraka? The blonde questioned her without letting go of his grip. Don't even try, the girl said, squinting and turning to turn her back and leave. She doesn't work here anymore. Bakugo threw her at him again. It's not what you think, she's my friend. I'm looking for her because I need to talk to her. Her name is Ochako. He hesitated to say it. He didn't trust her enough, but he needed to find her. I think I know who you are. He analyzed it. Well, she, right now, is right behind you, he said, pointing to the boy's back. Katsuki turned around and his mouth opened. He looked where the girl had pointed at him and saw a blonde dancing on top of the stage, next to a pipe. She was laughing as she danced, like she was having the best time. He blushed. Despite the wig she was wearing, he would recognize that face and that giant head anywhere other than that. He hated that smile. so it must have been her. When he noticed all the guys who were sitting looking at her and throwing money at her, he felt an immense desire to blow up that whole place, making a few sparks come out of his hands. And well, gentlemen, that was our dear kitten. Soon another kitten will come out to woo your hearts, the entertainer said, causing Uraraka to leave the stage. The blonde path to where those women entered and left. When he noticed that Ochako was leaving through a door, he was going to go towards her, but a guy crossed the brunette, leaving the blonde alert. Hey baby, I saw you dancing up there and I wondered, how much would a private dance cost me with you? He said, taking out a pile of bills. Sir, you can ask my colleagues. I don't do that kind of thing. Ochako smiled at him. Come on. The man took her arm tightly. Don't tell me no, or I'll talk to your boss, he said angrily. The girl threw her arm, loosening the guy's grip. He already told you no, and if you want to talk to the boss, go and get ready to get your ass smashed. The man took her arm again, this time with more brutality. Bakugo noticed that and came over to blow her guts out. But what he saw left him cold. Uraraka took his arm and bent it back, twisting it and putting it in a key. You bother me again, and I'll break it for you, the brunette said near her face. Oh, let go of me, miss. I won't bother you anymore, the man whimpered. I can't hear you. There's a lot of noise here, right? The girl said as she moved her arm more, making the key hurt more. I am sorry. I'll leave right away. Please let me go, I begged him. Good. Ochako let go. Move your disgusting ass. And the guy ran away. Bakugo saw all that in amazement. He did know how to defend himself. He noticed that Uraraka saw him, as she smiled at him and waved at him as he approached. Kacchan, he told him. I thought you didn't like these places. Katsuki thanked for the light, this time, since Ochako would not be able to notice her blush. She looked very pretty with the blonde wig, and not to mention what she was wearing. Silly. I didn't come to see your show. I came to look for you. We're leaving right now. I won't leave here. I have to make money somehow, he said with a frown. Bakugo took the bridge of his nose. If his boss made him go through all the rage and drove him crazy like no one else, Uraraka had stolen that place. Look, he asked him. I promise I'll help you find a job, and if we don't find anything or you don't like it, you can stay here. I won't tell you anything, but please, let's go. If we leave now, do you promise that tomorrow you won't leave me eating breakfast alone? Ochako asked. They gave me vacations, so you'll have me there every day, at least for a month, he said, settling. Really? That's great, Kacchan. By the way, we should go to the supermarket. You don't have anything good to eat. Yes, now let's go, he said, dragging her out. Before leaving, Uraraka said goodbye and went to get his things. They got into the car and drove to Katsuki's apartment. On the way, the brunette kept smiling and Bakugo kept looking at her out of the corner of his eye. When they arrived, Ochako ran in, throwing a boobie on the couch and taking off her wig. How tired I am. I'm very hungry. Silly, I told you I bought pizza, the blonde said, closing the door and taking off his jacket, which he threw on top of Uraraka, since his clothes showed a lot. Here, he offered her a box. That's delicious. Thank you, Kacchan, he said with a piece of cheese hanging from his mouth. Katsuki smiled when she saw that. Despite defending herself well and looking like a fighter, she was very childish and tender. He took out the whiskey and offered it to the girl, to which she refused, chewing the cheese triangle again. So she only poured a glass, again, with some ice. He sat down next to the girl and turned on the television. He took a sip and left the commercial for a movie where there were cars and explosions. What madness! Do you like those outrageous, Kacchan? The brunette asked him. Is it a joke? That's the best movie of all time. Don't tell me you haven't seen them. Well, I didn't watch much television. Ochako said, lifting her shoulders and eating another piece of pizza. If you live here, you'll have to educate yourself. Well, then let's watch it. Movie night, YouTube. Yororoka celebrated. Don't be an idiot. I'm not a little friend of yours to have a night of stupidity. The blonde shouted at him with white eyes. Well, then how will I become acculturated? He said sadly. I was almost certain that she made that face when she wanted to get something, because this time it had worked. He clicked his tongue. It's fine, but not today. It's too late. If you feel like it, and you're at home, we'll see it tomorrow. Yae, movie night. The girl shouted, celebrating. Katsuki grunted. He finished his glass of whiskey and ate a piece of pizza before Ochako finished it all. I was tired and wanted to sleep. Well, round face, it's time to rest, he said, standing up and going to the bathroom to brush his teeth. Yororoka also stood up, wrapping herself in Bakugo's jacket, had thrown at him, and went to the bathroom, peeking out the door. The blonde looked at her strangely. What? Ochako stood on the doorframe smiling at the boy. Good evening, kacchan. Thank you for the food. And without further ado, he went to the room. Katsuki finished brushing his teeth and went to lie down on the couch. He had to think about buying another bed or something. His back was already hurting, and without further ado, he fell asleep. Ochako felt the light coming through the window, and that made her unable to fall asleep again. She had woken up a while ago, but for her it was too early to get up. Arg, come on Ochako, sleep, she said to herself until she heard noises in the kitchen. Huh, kacchan must have already awakened. And he stood up, put on a small short, and walked out of the room. In the kitchen, Katsuki was looking for who knows what for all the furniture. Where are those fruits? He said, irritated, when Yororoka interrupted him, shouting. Good morning, kacchan. How did you sleep? He spoke euphorically as he entered the kitchen. What are you doing? Hello, round face. Help me look for some fruits that I left around here a few days ago. I can't find them, and I'm thirsty. I need to make a juice. The brunette shuddered instead when she heard that. She had eaten those fruits the day before, when the blonde left her alone. Obviously, if she wanted to continue living, she would never tell him, and it was better to change the subject. Hey, yesterday, I told you that we had to go to the supermarket. We need a lot of things. Bakugo stopped turning his back on her and looking for the fruits to look at her out of the corner of his eye. Something that Ochako was very intimidated by. He hated that she did that. I don't know why I have a faint feeling that you have anything to do with this, he said as he narrowed his eyes more and more. Yororoka, in desperation, took the car keys and ran away. If you don't go down now, I'll go alone with your car. Dare to touch my steering wheel with a hair, and you'll die a bitch, he yelled at her as he ran out of the apartment after the brunette. When they got to the car, he snatched the keys while she laughed. Then they got into the vehicle while the blonde lectured the girl. You do that again, and I'll break that angel face. Did you hear, Dale? Ha ha ha, kacchan. Don't be so scandalous. You make people look at us, Ochako said, pointing outwards. There's no one here. We're in a fucking underground parking lot. The boy yelled at him, very annoyed. And why are you wearing a t-shirt of mine again? You slept with her again, and you're not even able to change it to go to the damn supermarket. Yororoka only looked at him with a big smile, while laughing at how hysterical his partner was. He was no longer afraid of him when he yelled at him or made a fuss. Now he enjoyed Katsuki's company. He saw how he began to accelerate the car and leave the parking lot to go buy food with a face of wanting to run over everyone who crossed his path. PFFF, ha ha ha. He laughed loudly. Oh God, kacchan, ha ha ha. We have to save detergent, so why dirty my clothes and sleep? Besides, who gets ready to go to the supermarket? It's something irrational. Bakugo was already smoking from his ears, and to detonate everything, just the traffic light gave him red. He threw his head forward and rested it on the horn. trying to calm down without realizing that now everyone was really looking at them because of the noise they made. Entering the supermarket, the brunette ran to get a cart and began to fill it with everything. Katsuki, for his part, went directly to the canning aisle, to which Ochako came out of nowhere to cross in front of him. "This corridor is forbidden from today," he said, crossing his arms and closing the way with the car. "Are you really going crazy? Come across you again, and I'll burn you to ashes. Now move. I already told you that no kacchan. All these things are carcinogenic, and your hands are fine. Don't you know how to make a little noodles in a soup? Are you useless or what?" Katsuki raised his voice, raising his hand menacingly, letting out a few sparks. Ochako took the wrist from the same hand that the blonde had raised and began to walk, ignoring Bakugo's threats, taking him to the grocery aisle. "Look, we need rice, noodles, oil, eggs, lettuce. Yes, ketchup, snacks. Maybe someday we will want to eat fish. That can't be missing. Hot sauce," he asked, looking back where the blonde was, while leading him by the wrist, to which he replied yes, shaking his head resignedly. Uraraka, with the other hand, took the things, throwing them back, making them fall into the cart that the boy was carrying with the hand he kept unoccupied. "We must go to the dairy. Go get milk and cheese. I need to go on a mission to the dessert aisle," he finished saying before running off and leaving Bakugo alone. Katsuki was throwing some yogurts in the car when the brunette arrived, eating a chocolate dessert. "Kacchan, you must try this delicacy," she said with a blush on her face which showed her pleasure in eating. The blonde saw how the girl ate dessert inside the supermarket without having paid for it yet and was alarmed. "Round face, you can't eat that without paying for it. You're stealing," he said, growling and pointing his finger at her, judging her. "But if I'll pay for it, it's just that I couldn't hold on. Come on, try it. It's delicious," the girl said as she raised the spoon with the dessert to the blonde's mouth, who moved to avoid eating it. "I will not be an accomplice to this crime. I am a policeman. I cannot inflict the law." Katsuki crossed his arms and spoke, while dodging the spoon that the girl put in his face. He noticed that she made a face of sorrow at what he said. "Shit, stop using that angel face to get things," he said, already angry. "Then if you would try it?" asked Ochako, approaching Bakugo's arm and taking it so that it would not escape him again. Katsuki rolled his eyes and opened his mouth disinterestedly, letting the brunette stick the spoon with the delicious dessert inside. She looked at him, seeking his approval, but before that, they both heard a familiar voice in front of them. "It can't be." Hearing this, Bakugo became so nervous that he broke the spoon without even taking it out of his mouth, leaving the handle in the brunette's hand and the other part inside his mouth. Uraraka saw the figure in front of them, and her smile grew like never before. "Mina, it can't be you." The brunette didn't believe it. "Do you know anyone else with the same style and color as me?" Both girls screamed, very high-pitched, running to hug each other. The blonde covered his ears. "Ah, stupid," he said as he touched himself better, to make sure his ears weren't bleeding. "I can't believe it. Ochako, you're so pretty. Your hair has grown a lot. But you still have the same girlish face as always," Ashido said, while touching the brunette's hair and face with fascination. "Mina, you're beautiful," said Uraraka, also fascinated. "You grew up a lot and... wow, you didn't just grow in bearing." The brunette took the breasts of the pink-skinned girl and began to lift them, making them bounce. "They're giants. When did you get them?" Katsuki turned redder than ever and took the brown-haired girl behind him, leaving her in the middle of the two women. "Round face, you can't do that in public," he reproached him, his face in a mess. "And you depraved. Do not perverse Uraraka with your giant melons." "Bakugo, is it really you? When I saw you, I thought I was looking wrong. The truth, I thought that you would have already had problems with someone worse than you, and you were already dead." Ashido said that, putting a hand on his chin, pretending to think. Katsuki looked at her, his typical grimace and white eyes. "What did you say, bitch?" He smiled at her, making small explosions in her hand, ready to send her flying with one of those. Ochako stood in front of him and spoke slowly to calm him down. "Kacchan, don't do this. I haven't seen Mina for many years. I really want to talk to her." Putting on his dog face again, the blonde looked at the brunette, and little by little, he began to calm down. He didn't even try. His body only began to calm down with the touch of the brunette, and his cheeks were dyed a slight pink. He clicked his tongue. "Make it clear to that bitch that no one is worse than me." He raised his head to avoid the eye contact he had with Uraraka and looked at Ishido with the most demonic face he had. "And I can prove it to you." Mina shivered through her body at Katsuki's gaze, but he turned his back to take the car and go to get the things that Ochako did not let her take out, and after that, pay at the checkouts. "God, Ochako, how did you do that?" The pink-skinned girl approached the brunette expectantly. "I don't know. I think I can deal with that beast, hee." Uraraka said, scratching the back of his neck with one hand. "I never imagined that you and Bakugo could ever get along. Kaya girl, what other secrets do you keep, huh?" Ishido gave the brunette small elbow taps. "How long have you been dating?" Ochako felt the blood rise to her face. "What?" He put both his hands on his face to calm the heat. "What things do you say, Mina? Haha." And he pushed Ishido slightly away from her, since he was very close. "Kacchan and I boyfriends, ha ha ha. We just get along." He muttered as he laughed nervously and his stomach churned. "He's helping me a little, since—" "Ochako, get me out of here." The brunette heard her friend's voice scream and looked sideways. When she did not find her, she looked up and saw her curled up in the air. Seeing that, Uraraka clumsily joined her hands to free her friend from zero gravity, who fell to the ground suddenly, making the expectant supermarket wrinkle their faces in pain, excluding Katsuki, who was laughing silently as he watched everything from the checkout line. "I'm sorry, Ishido. I got nervous and apparently activated my quirk without realizing it," the brunette said, very embarrassed, while she made small bows. "Don't worry, Ochako." Mina rubbed her head as she sat on the floor, trying to get back up. "Sometimes it happens to me too, hee." The brunette helped her friend to her feet. "It didn't hurt, right?" he said to Uraraka, who was teary-eyed from the guilt he felt and the shame he was going through, to which she responded by nodding her head. And then? The girl's cheeks were dyed red again. "What then?" "You and Bakugo. We're just friends, Mina." Uraraka lowered her head. The pink-skinned girl looked at that, trying to figure out what it meant. "He's helping me, and we get along very well. You gave him food in his mouth. I just wanted you to try a dessert. You don't know how hard it was." They were very close together when I saw them. He was running away, Ishido. The brunette brought her arms closer, making fists with her hands and moving them. Is that t-shirt you're wearing his?" "Huh?" The brunette looked at the t-shirt she was wearing. "Oh no, what a bad moment." "Ah, this one." "Yes," he said, rolling his eyes. "And you got her out of?" "From his room." "Oh God, Ochako, you're a pervert." Ishido squealed and Uraraka covered his mouth. "Don't think wrong, Mina. I sleep in his room, and he in the armchair. I only wear his pajama shirt."
Well,
"I don't believe you at all. Tomorrow you and I will go for a walk, and you will tell me everything. And by everything I mean everything, hee. We will have to make up for all these years that we have not seen each other." The brunette laughed. "Sure, wait for me a second," he said and ran to Katsuki, who was paying for the things they were carrying. "Lend me your cell phone, Kacchan," he said as he checked the newly named man's pockets looking for the telephone set. "Ah, don't touch me," the blonde man said, lifting the girl's arms carefully so he could look for her phone. "What do you want this garbage for?" he said, passing it to him. "I need to save Mina's number, and I have nowhere to go." "Don't with angel face. I don't want that pervert's number on my cell phone." I spoke loudly to him. Ochako laughed. Don't call her a pervert. If you do me this favor, I'll accompany you on this movie night, Izuku. And she went to her friend. But that was your idea, silly, Katsuki shouted from the cashier. He couldn't go after her since he had to pay. Uraraka arrived at Ashido, and she wrote down her number on her cell phone. After that they said goodbye since the blonde was leaving without her. And she had no doubt that if she did not get to the car before he left, he would leave her there without hesitation. The way home was typical. Ochako driving Bakugo crazy on purpose. On the way, the brunette forced the blonde to buy her some chocolates, which he could not eat in the car. No matter how hard he tried, Katsuki refused and refused again, making it more than clear that in his vehicle he did not eat. When they entered the apartment, the girl left a couple of bags that she had with her on the table, throwing herself on the couch. What a tiring trip. And you tell me, the blonde man said, entering his home with 10 grocery bags full and a big vein on his head, showing how angry he was. He left the bags on the table along with the ones the girl had left seconds before and went to the refrigerator to get a couple of beers, opened them and passed one to Uraraka, who received it and instantly took a sip. I think I'll get used to this. Hey, kacchan, do you have alcohol, lunch, and dinner? Idiot. Ochako laughed a little at the answer. She watched as the boy took things out of the bags and put them away. She thought about what Mina had told her. She and Katsuki boyfriends. In the beginning that was impossible. Never in the multiverse. Never. Never and again never. But now, he couldn't deny that he had a great time with Bakugo. In fact, he wasn't afraid of him anymore. He liked to make him angry, and he was laughing most of the day. She remembered when they were a little drunk and her heart beat harder. That night she admired him and noticed his muscles, his chest, his mouth. What must Bakugo Katsuki's mouth taste like? What the hell? Why was he thinking about that? What was happening to him? And why did she get so nervous when Mina asked her if they were dating? Hey, round face, are you hungry? I think it's time for lunch. The blonde man told her, violently pulling her out of his thoughts. Huh? Uraraka looked at the boy's mouth again. Immersed in her conscience, she raised her hand, putting it in her own mouth. Hey, I'm talking to you. Eh? Only then did he return to reality. Yes, of course. Katsuki looked at her with a long face. Did you at least listen to me? I'm sorry, kacchan, what were you saying? The girl asked, staring at him so intently, making Bakugo a little nervous. Lunch, hunger, food. Do you want, or will you also have alcohol for lunch? CL sure, lunchtime, he said, raising his arm with his fist, trying not to let the blonde man notice anything. You're so weird. He finished by telling her, turning around to start cooking who knows what. After a while, they were both sitting at the table, where a large buffet was located. Whoa, kacchan, why do you buy so much garbage if you cook like the gods? Ochako had hearts in her eyes and screamed every time she tasted something on the table. Nay, I'm lazy, I'm never here. I don't have time to cook or go to the stupid supermarkets. Katsuki said, as he put his elbow on the table and steadied his head with his hand. You could teach me. I can cook for you, but I'm not very good at it, he said as he ate some salad. Nyaya, even a piece of leaf is delicious for you. Bakugo blushed slightly at the girl's statement. Don't say that. I swear that if anyone finds out about this, you won't be saved, he shouted, while Uraraka only nodded his head and mouth full. Well, what did they talk about with the silly rose? Ochako choked and began to cough. When she calmed down, she looked at the blonde and spoke. Nothing important, girl things. One of these days we'll see each other and talk about everything, haha. The young woman paused. The truth is that I'm not interested. I was just curious. It was very funny to see that bitch flying and falling to the ground. Ha ha ha. Bakugo laughed with his mouth open, revealing his food and banging on the table. Hey, don't laugh. He hit himself ugly. Uraraka remembered the moment and tried to change the subject so as not to be embarrassed. What about you? Don't talk to the guys anymore. How is Kirishima? Katsuki swallowed. No, and I don't know. We took different paths. The fact that they have taken different paths does not mean that they have had to stop talking. He clicked his tongue. He didn't want to talk about it. And what about you? You tell me I shouldn't have stopped talking to them. But apparently you didn't know about the silly rose a long time ago. That's different, kacchan. I went with my parents for a while, and that's when I lost all contact. Believe me that when I got here, I tried by all means to recover my friendships. And boy, did it go badly. The blonde man said, making the girl angry. What do you mean by that? If you say it for yourself. Then it really went badly for me. Ochako stood up from the table. I'm not hungry anymore. And he went to Katsuki's room. But what the hell is wrong with him? What did I say? The boy wondered. And so they remained until after midnight, when Uraraka finally deigned to leave the room. She went out because the urge to go to the bathroom and the hunger were already stronger. Although she did not want to continue angry with the boy, and when she looked for him with her eyes, she did not find him. He went to the bathroom and then to the kitchen to get some chips from a piece of furniture. He looked for Katsuki more and found him sleeping on the couch. He went where the explosive boy's head was located, and with a little fear he picked it up, sat down and dropped the head on his legs. He ate some potatoes, making the crumbs fall on Bakugo's face, which made him wake up. Katsuki opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was Ochako's face in front of him. And if it weren't for her affirming it, he would have fallen. What do you think you're doing? Crazy? Do you want to kill me? He yelled at her, and the brunette laughed softly. No, I'm here to apologize. Sorry for yelling at you, Bakugo, he said with a sad look. Don't put on that manipulative angel face. And don't worry, I'm always yelling at you. But because you're really a fool and you deserve it. Ha, you're a fool, kacchan. The blonde saw the girl's shy look when she called him silly and his heart stopped. Uraraka really was pretty, very pretty, and he would not deny it anymore. It was not a crime to find a woman beautiful either. He saw that her face was very close and sat down immediately. He felt that his heart was going to fly out of his chest if he continued like this. He turned his face to look back at the brunette who was with him. What the fuck was that he was feeling? Cold. He was definitely getting sick. Hey, the movie we said the other night. Katsuki didn't know how to finish the sentence, so he could break the tension that was forming between them. The one about the cars and explosions? Ochako asked. Exactly, huh? I think they'll give it in a while on TV. MHHH, do you still want to? See? I felt like I was asking for marriage or something. I was quite nervous. Of course, movie night, the girl shouted. Happy night of stupid movies, Bakugo repeated with a smile. I wanted to update earlier, but in my country, its independence is celebrated every year, and this year it was 5 days. 5 days of party. I swear I'm still recovering, JJ. But well, here's the new chapter. I hope you like it as much as I. I also wanted to take the opportunity to send a big hug and a lot of strength to my readers and all people in general in Mexico. I don't want to believe what is happening. I'm with my heart in my hand. It hurts me a lot, and I really have even cried wishing that there were no more victims. From the bottom of my heart, I hope you can recover soon. If you were able to get up once, now you can do it again and with more strength than ever. Your Chilean brothers and sisters will always support you. Katsuki looked out of the corner of his eye at the brunette who was in the kitchen, who was throwing some snacks into a pot to take them to the table that was between the couch and the TV, so that he could watch the movie calmly, while he connected some cables in the stereo to hear the sound better. Suddenly he was staring at her. But when she was about to turn to look at him, he pretended to be very busy and focused on the cables. Ochako had already finished. She was carrying 2 dishes with food, and after leaving them on the table, she went to the refrigerator to take out 2 beers and go to sit down, stretching out her hand with one of them, offering it to Bakugo. He took the beer and threw himself into the armchair next to Uraraka, changing the channels until he found the one in which they would show the film. Arriving at the channel, the film had not yet started, so they left it there until it started. They were talking about anything when suddenly there was a rumble outside. Kacchan, what was that? The brunette asked, frightened. Katsuki stood up and walked to his balcony, peeking out. I think it was thunder. It looks like it will rain tomorrow, Katsuki said, deducing it from the way the sky looked. I love the rain, he said happily. I love the sound of the drops and how clean the air is, but it's very sad to think about animals and people who are homeless. He finished, bowing his head with a sad expression. Seeing Ochako sad made Bakugo hurt somewhat, so he tried to change the subject. Hey, don't drink so much beer today. A drop fell on Uraraka's head. She remembered what happened the last time she drank too much with the blonde one. Hey, don't say that. It's your fault for giving them to me. The girl reproached him. Bakugo's face fell. Is it a joke? Ha ha ha. You're always so grave, Kacchan. The brunette laughed as she took a handful of chips from a platter. Today I'll just relax and let myself go. He leaned back as he put the potatoes in his mouth, leaning on the back of the chair and stepping up his beer. You're like a tramp, the blonde said with a disgusted face. But at the same time he settled backwards, also steepening his beer. They stayed like this for a while, talking about many things, and finishing and opening other beers, until the brunette dared to ask. Kacchan. What's wrong, round face? Will you ever tell me what happened to Kirishima and the others? I always thought you would be together forever. Oh silly, it sounds like we've gotten married or something. Katsuki said angrily. He didn't like to talk about it. I already told you that we took different paths. But Kumi, I swear curiosity is killing me. Ochako asked him. I'll tell you on one condition, which I know you won't like. Let go. I can take anything. You'll tell me what happened to you and the idiot Deku. The boy said dryly. Uraraka's face changed. While Bakugo didn't like to talk about his friend Kirishima, she didn't like to talk about what had happened to Midoriya either. But she could take advantage of it. Well, but you first, the girl told him. Just before the blonde could say anything, the TV began to play with the opening song of the movie they were waiting to see. Saved by the Bell. I'll tell you later, Katsuki said, as he finished one beer and opened another. Now it's time for explosions. I had never been so happy. Of all the times I had seen that film. Over the course of the film, Bakugo and Uraraka would say a few comments. She would ask him a few questions, and he would answer. They would eat, drink, and laugh. The blonde was having a really good time. It's been a long time since he saw a movie with someone. He had forgotten how fun it was. While she was laughing at something Ochako had said, he stared at her without her noticing. She was too immersed in the film. He saw how, from time to time, she laughed at something that happened or was said on the TV. That girl's smile was like a blow in the pit of the stomach. She didn't understand why she felt that way. At first she just hated that she was always smiling. But now it was too strange a feeling. He saw how the girl moved her head to look at him. As she did that, he noticed how her silky hair moved. She wanted to touch that hair and stroke it to see if it was as soft as it looked. Just like the brunette's skin, so white and smooth. Ochako smiled at him. Please stop doing that, he thought. She settled down, leaning back on the chair and resting her head on the blonde's legs. Kacchan, I'm a little dizzy, haha. Can I lie down here? He asked her. It was obvious that the alcohol was having an effect. But he let it go. If he got drunk again, it didn't matter. He had already told her that he wanted to relax. Well, you've already done it. What does it matter? Bakugo said, looking to the side so that Uraraka wouldn't notice his slight blush. He had to learn to control that. She smiled at him and turned to continue looking at the TV, unlike Kacchan, who found it more fun to look at the brunette than to watch that movie for the 10th time. He watched as the girl's hair pulled to the side, revealing her neck, and he was almost sure that his hands would fit perfectly there. He lowered his gaze and stared at the girl's small waist. Wait, what was he thinking? If he continued like this, something was going to wake up under his pants, and having the girl lying on his thighs, that was a very bad idea. She took the last sip of the beer she had in her hands, and when she put the empty container aside, she could see that there were too many empty bottles, which is why Ochako felt dizzy, and he was thinking about so much nonsense. Suddenly he wanted to change. He took the brunette's head and lifted it up. He wanted to stop and look for something. Uraraka stopped watching the movie, only to stare at it, until she saw him take a bottle of whiskey from a piece of furniture, and she took the opportunity to open another beer. Katsuki lifted the girl's head again, sat down and put her back on his lap, drinking from a glass that only had whiskey and ice. Now if he would concentrate on anything other than the girl he had lying on his thighs. They stared at the film for a long time in silence, until the credits began to roll. Wow, now I understand why it's your favorite movie, the gravity handler said. I think I'd see her 1,000,000 times. See, I think 1,000,000 is too much. I'm already getting bored. The blonde had to admit that he was a little drunk. Are you crazy? It was a work of art. Ochako couldn't finish the sentence, as a loud boom interrupted her, making her open her eyes wider than she could and stopping in her tracks, staggering a little as she did so. What was that? He asked. He was terrified of thunder. Bakugo stood calmer. If Uraraka was a little drunk, he was more drunk. He walked to the balcony again and opened the window to show the rain falling. Apparently the rain was for tonight. The blonde man said, "Don't call me Einstein." The brunette answered, approaching the balcony, taking the boy's arm, making him stand still. "Did he tell you that I love the rain?" he said, smiling slightly. "But I hate thunder. It's like the world is yelling at us, and I hate being yelled at," he finished saying with a serious expression. Katsuki noticed the melancholy in Ochako, and took her hand a little roughly thanks to the drunkenness, to go out to the balcony and feel the rain. "I don't like the rain very much. It doesn't let me use my quirk well," Bakugo confessed to him. "But when it's not necessary, I can enjoy it a lot." This time he smiled, looking up at the clouds, letting the water fall on his face. Uraraka, who was still holding the blonde's hand, felt her heart beating stronger than ever. Seeing that boy like this was a gift of life. He was on a balcony, in the rain, holding the warm hand of the explosive teenager he knew, who despite being an idiot, was very handsome. I wouldn't deny it. Katsuki was literally in his best shape. If it weren't for the fact that the water that fell on him made her think more clearly, she would already be on top of him kissing him. He smiled, blushing at what he thought, just as Bakugo opened his eyes. "What are you laughing at, angel face?" the blonde asked, raising an eyebrow. The brunette jumped slightly, letting go of the boy's hand. "Nothing. I'm just so happy to be here with you, kacchan," he said cheerfully, putting his cold hands on his face. "You're very cold. Don't touch me with your hands," he said, taking her hands off his face, and this time taking both, facing each other. Ochako looked at Katsuki's intense eyes, which were already making her nervous. In a fit of rage, he let go of the blonde's hands, as if they were burning him, and began to float without realizing it. "Kacchan, you're making me nervous. Don't do that." The more than red brunette reproached him, who was already floating a little beyond the balcony where Bakugo stood. "I'm not doing anything stupid to you," Katsuki said, nervously. He hadn't realized what he was doing until Uraraka let go of his hands very abruptly. He just looked at the girl's mouth. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to know what the mouth of the girl who was staying in his apartment tasted like, and that made him feel comfortable, calm, and sometimes, very rarely happy. But when she saw how the brunette began to float, she realized everything. Her head was not thinking well. "Get down from there right now. You can hurt yourself," Bakugo shouted angrily, leaning against the balcony railing. You're going to catch a cold and forget I'll take care of you. Ochako didn't know if it was the alcohol or the rain, but she was getting very melancholy. Stop yelling at me, kacchan, she replied sadly and in a low voice, making the blonde barely hear her. They stared for a while. Uraraka liked how the rain felt falling on her body, and only when Katsuki dared to stretch out her hand, she took it, and they entered the apartment. You're a fool, go change your clothes, Bakugo told him. I don't have any clean clothes anymore. Katsuki took her hand again, leading her into the room, where he handed her a t-shirt of his long enough for her to put on, and nothing could be seen. He left the place and poured himself another glass of whiskey. What was happening in that apartment? He needed to clear his mind, with more alcohol, obviously. When Ochako left the room, she held on to the doorway. Do you like my new dress? Spring, summer? In the middle of the rain? Huh, what do you think? Katsuki gave a half smile. The shirt was huge, but it still looked good. You're really a fool, huh? Ha ha ha. You don't have a sense of humor, kacchan, the brunette said, pulling out another beer and uncorking it as she walked to the couch. I was thinking, and wouldn't you like to sleep in your bed today? Katsuki stared at her. If it's a joke, I'll blow that giant head off for you. Ha ha ha, stop threatening me, damn it. Uraraka laughed loudly and gave him a little push. I'm serious. I think I must be the one sleeping here if the bed is yours. If you want, you can sleep here today. But I'm not a caveman. I won't leave you sleeping here, he replied as he sat down next to him. Kacchan, you're a gentleman mall, the girl said laughing, settling into the armchair in 1,000 ways. What are you doing? Ridiculous, the blonde questioned her curiously. I'm looking for the right position. Daya, don't you see? He said, putting his feet on the back of the chair, and his head was hanging where his legs should go. Katsuki slapped his forehead. You're like a 5-year-old girl. Can't you sit still? He said, moving his hands all the time, trying to prevent a future fall of Ochako. Stay still. She couldn't finish the sentence because she stood up suddenly with her arms outstretched, trying to grab the brunette who had gone backwards forward, trying to turn around on the couch to be comfortable according to her. But when she held her, her feet got tangled, causing them both to fall. But she managed to hug her and turn around so that the weight of the blow would not be carried away by the girl. His eyes were closed and his brow was furrowed. He had hit his head hard, and it was hurting. He opened his eyes to yell at the brunette. But when he did, he saw that their faces were very close, and that she was not moving. She was just looking at him. He didn't know what to do. Uraraka was on top of him and didn't move. What's more, he looked at him out of the corner of his eye, and he could even feel her breath on his face. He tried to let go of his grip, but instead, he just hugged her tighter, drawing her closer to him. Ochako, feeling the strength of Katsuki's hug, blushed. She wanted to stand up, but she couldn't. The blonde's hug made her pressure rise and her stomach turn. Besides, it was so close. And it was she who had to move before something bad happened. What was done in these cases? It wasn't like I had the experience in the heart either. I had seen some movies where something happened like what she was in now. But they always ended in a kiss. A kiss, thought the brunette. Would it be a good idea? Uraraka wondered. Should I kiss Bakugo now? Did he want that? But before thinking about it, the blonde tightened the hug more, which made Ochako's stomach turn again. But this time, he felt something rise up his throat. The blonde, immersed in alcohol, and at the moment he just let himself go. He didn't care about anything anymore. He had the brunette who was on his mind all night on top of him. With her mouth centimeters away, he just had to kiss her, and that's it. But when he was about to try, he saw how the girl's face changed to an anguished one. He also noticed that she put her hands in her mouth and stood running to the bathroom. Bakugo stood still. Was he really so unlucky? He stopped when he heard the sounds coming from the bathroom. He wanted to go inside to help the girl, but he was locked. So he knocked softly. Hey, angel face, are you okay? He asked on the other side of the door. No one answered. Oi, she replies silly. Don't worry me, are you alive? Nothing. I swear I'll kick this fucking door down if you don't answer me now, damn bitch. Again, nothing. Katsuki hated being ignored. So with the combination of anger and concern, sparks began to fly out of his hands and his face of rage was to run away. Suddenly the door opened slowly, revealing how Ochako peeked out with teary eyes. Kacchan. The girl said quietly, I'm sorry. Bakugo didn't know why she apologized, or because she was crying. But that made him dumbfounded. He didn't like to see girls crying. They were so loud and usually always did it because of some stupidity. But seeing Uraraka like this, after seeing her so happy, always broke his heart. What do you feel? You haven't done anything wrong, he said more calmly. I. The brunette couldn't finish speaking because tears began to come out of her eyes. Katsuki had no idea what to do. He had never comforted a friend, and even less a girl, so he only managed to hug her. He put one hand on her head and the other on her waist, bringing her closer to him and lending him his shoulder. He didn't know if it was a good idea, but apparently it was working, because the brunette returned his hug, squeezing him and crying. Stop crying, you look horrible, he said, pushing her away a little and taking her cheek with the hand he had on his head. Kacchan, I. She let go of one hand from the boy's grip to wipe away her tears a little. I didn't make it to the toilet and let everything out on the mat, she finished, covering her face on the blonde's chest and crying again. Katsuki looked inside the bathroom and saw with his eyes wide open the mess inside. He used all the tolerance he had learned over the years working with his idiot boss and counted to 1,000 so as not to kill the brunette he was hugging. And don't worry. That's all he could say. Please don't throw me out on the street. I like being here with you. There she was. That's why she cried. When she was drunk, her emotions were running high, and she thought he would kick her out of her apartment for that. And it wasn't bad. Anyone else would have been thrown down the balcony, no matter how rain, cold, or whatever. But I wasn't going to do that to Ochako. I couldn't. Where would I go? I won't kick you out. You can stop crying, he said more calmly. I couldn't. She was like this for a while, when suddenly she began to hear small snores. Yes, Uraraka had fallen asleep, and apart from snoring, she had hiccups. He took her to his bed. He would not let her sleep on the couch, as she asked him in that condition. Luckily, she already had something similar to pajamas on. She covered it, and before leaving, she stared at it. Would it be a good idea to leave it like that? In his experience as a police officer, he had seen people drown from vomiting. He thought about it a lot before deciding. She went to the bathroom to clean, then to the living room to take out all the empty bottles that were lying around and turn off the light. She closed the doors and finally went to her room, took off her shoes and sat on the other side of the bed where the brunette was. He stared at her. She looked very pretty sleeping. He thought about what had happened that night. Too much for him. Having a pretty girl who accompanied him drinking. Living with him, maybe it was not a very good idea. He looked at Ochako's body that formed above the down, and at the same time he blushed. He got angry. He grunted a little and lay down next to her. He didn't want to take off his clothes, and if it weren't for the cold, he would have laid down on the blankets. But it was raining, and it was freezing, something he didn't like at all. He hugged Uraraka over the down, still blushing and angry at what he was doing, and adjusted her, leaving her aside. Something that if she had an accident, she could not drown, and besides he would be there to send her flying to the bathroom, and that for nothing in the world she would dirty his bed. He closed his eyes to sleep at last, when he felt that she took his hand and moved it inside the bed to hug her by the waist, and without letting go he stayed there. He was surprised, and at the same time wanted to die of shame, but without realizing it, he fell asleep. Katsuki felt so hot. The sun was like never before. What about the weather? One night it rains like never before, and the next day it's 30. Great. He opened his eyes slowly and lazily. He didn't want to wake up. He was very comfortable. But before he could see clearly, he saw a brown hair in front of him. He stirred a little and rubbed his eyes to make sure that what he saw was a mirage or something. But when he saw clearly, he realized what was happening. He was sleeping with Uraraka. But worse than sleeping with Uraraka was that he was hugging her, and he had her very well in his arms, and she didn't even flinch. She was with her back to him and had one hand in his hand. Bakugo didn't understand until he remembered what had happened the night before. Shit. What did I do last night? I hope this dwarf doesn't remember, he said to himself, looking at the brunette next to him. But despite that, he didn't feel like getting up. It felt good to sleep in his bed after so many days. He looked at the girl's bare neck, and he didn't lack the desire to kiss it. Apparently being so focused on work made him clear his mind of lustful things. But now that he was on vacation, and to top it off, with a girl who, despite being a fool, was cute, funny, and had to be admitted, could be very sexy. He got out of bed without waking Ochako, went to the bathroom to shower and brush his teeth, then returned to his room, with only a towel on, and took out a short and a t-shirt. Then he went to the kitchen to put the kettle on, and be able to make himself a coffee. The migraine killed him. He hadn't drunk so much for a long time. As the water boiled, he re-entered his room, this time to wake Uraraka. "Hey, angel face, it's time to wake up," he said as he moved her a little. The girl had her cheeks redder than usual, and was unresponsive. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. "Wake up, you damn lazy." The brunette moved a little, turning upwards slowly, with a disgusted face. "No, kacchan, my head hurts. Please give me 5 more minutes," she said, breathing a little more heavily. Bakugo narrowed his eyes, had a hunch that Ochako might get sick after the soaking wet that happened floating in the rain the night before. And to make sure he was right, he brought his forehead close to hers, feeling the immense heat. Uraraka was boiling, and he didn't need a damn thermometer to realize that he was over 40 fever. When she felt her friend's forehead on hers, she opened her eyes slowly to meet the boy's face inches away. "Are you going to wake me up like princesses?" the brunette asked, with a small smile. The blonde quickly walked away from her with a frown and a little blush. "Of course not, silly," the boy shouted angrily. That dwarf really knew how to make him angry. "Ha ha ha, it's just kacchan jokes. I was taking your temperature. You're very sick, and even your face gives you away," Katsuki would say, growling and pointing at her. Now that you say it, I don't feel very well." Uraraka's eyes were half open, and she felt that her body was heavy, as well as her eyelids and her face. She didn't feel like making the slightest force, and she felt that her head would explode at any second. "I told you you'd catch a cold if you stayed in the rain, Tonta. Don't treat me like that," the girl asked with her typical dog face. "You can stop making that fucking face," the blonde shouted at him. Ochako just laughed a little, and then closed her eyes. She had gone back to sleep. So Katsuki opted for nothing more than to go and make her precious coffee. While he drank it, he thought about the night before and everything that had happened with the brunette. He remembered when they held hands, when he was about to kiss her. He remembered how she accompanied him with the beers. He remembered how he looked at her last night. If it weren't for the nausea that went down, that night might have ended differently. He blushed slightly at the thought of that and got up to look for a tray and put a glass of natural orange juice, a tea and 2 breads with avocado in it. He went to the room and tried to wake the girl up again, but having no luck, he just left the tray on a dresser and left the room. He sat in his armchair. He had to think about many things, especially with the subject of Ochako. But there was something that was on his mind since Uraraka had asked him. What would become of Kirishima? Despite all the differences they had, it could be said that the only person he considered a true friend was the red-haired man. He took his cell phone and scrolled down his contact list until he found his name. Would he still have the same number? He was about to press the button to call, but what would he say to him? They hadn't seen each other for years, and calling him out of nowhere would be very strange. Besides, Ochako's stubborn was sick, and he had to take care of her. In reality, why should he take care of her? He was at it, when out of nowhere his phone started ringing, and he answered. "Who?" he replied dryly. "Oh, Ochako," the voice on the other end of the phone asked. "No." Silence. "Eh, Bakugo, I'm Mina." Katsuki pulled the phone out of his ear to see the name on the phone. Ashido Mina. "Ah, what's up, pervert?" he asked boredly. "Don't call me that," the pink-skinned girl reproached him. "Ochako and I had plans today. Could you find her with me?" "Well, he's sleeping and doesn't want to wake up." Ashido thought about it for a moment. The boy sounded very conceited and knew exactly what to do for him to do whatever she wanted. "Oh, were you to her, Kacchan?" he said, whispering the nickname that the brunette told him in a mocking tone. Bakugo's blood boiled. He was very angry. "Aorg, I'll kill you, damn bitch. I'm not a pervert like you. She's sick," the blonde shouted at him. "Sick?" the girl asked. "What is it? Fever and stuff? All he's done is sleep," Katsuki would say, still irritated, until an idea crossed his mind. "But if you want, you can come and see her. I must go to work." "EA, are you crazy? You can't leave it like this," Mina reproached him. "I'll go right now. Where do you live?" Bakugo gave her the address of her apartment and cut it off. She went to her room to put on her slippers, and before going out again, she looked at the brunette. She was sleeping peacefully. She still hadn't woken up to eat her breakfast. She looked at her very pretty to be sick. She looked at how she moved her mouth when she breathed. That mouth, why did she want to kiss that girl? Having thousands after him, it had to be her. And not only did she want to kiss her mouth, definitely, something bad was happening to her with Ochako. He left the room. He didn't want to keep thinking nonsense. He had to talk to someone quickly if he didn't want to go crazy. So he left his house, taking the keys to his car and his cell phone, dialing the number that he had previously hesitated to do so. Mina arrived at the apartment, and after knocking on the door about 50 times, a disheveled Uraraka opened it. She was all disheveled, with a tired look and a giant Katsuki t-shirt on. "God, Ochako, what did that damn thing do to you?" Ashido lamented. "You're horrible." The brunette slurped her snot before answering. "I know, I'm sick. I just want to die," he said, walking, almost crawling back to the bed where he was sleeping and lying down again. The pink girl entered the apartment following the brunette. "For all might, how much does Bakugo spend paying the maid?" "This home is sparkling and beautiful," Mina said in amazement. "Kacchan is very clean," the brunette said, looking at the tray with food. It was obvious that the only one who could leave it there was the blonde one. "It has very strict rules," he finished saying with a slight smile, imagining the boy making him that breakfast. "Every day I am more surprised by Bakugo. Who would have thought, huh?" Ashido River. "Mina, can I tell you something? But it's something very confidential. Swear to me that you won't tell anyone," Uraraka said, who was now sitting on the bed, looking at the flasks. "Of course, don't you trust me anymore?" he said, smiling. "Of course, silly, haha." The brunette laughed. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. "Then let me understand," said a boy, who was standing in front of the blonde in an alley. "We haven't spoken for how long? 5 years? And now you're coming to me to talk to me about a girl." Katsuki didn't like the way that red-haired man spoke to her. "GRR, don't say it like that, useless." He was getting angry. He was still angry with his old friend. "But that's right, you fool," he yelled at him, hardening his skin and getting into a fighting stance. Bakugo was fed up with this idiot talking to him like that, and he was even angrier at the sight of his face. "What do you want, Kirishima, you damn useless man?" the blonde said in the raspy voice, this time imitating his posture and making small but dangerous explosions in his hands. "What do you want?" Kirishima yelled. quickly approaching him and sinking one of his fists into Katsuki's face. The latter shot out of the alley, but before falling to the ground he turned around and was able to fall on his feet, stopping immediately and running almost flying towards the redhead, sending him flying with a kick so hard that, if it hadn't been for the fact that he had hardened more at the last second, he would have broken something. Kirishima rejoined, as if nothing had happened, running again towards Bakugo, who did not let him approach as he began to make explosions in front of him, intending to get them to the redhead. But out of nowhere, his old friend came out of the smoke, hitting him again in the stomach. But before flying again, the blonde grabbed him by the shirt, making them fly together towards the street while they continued to hit each other. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. It was already getting dark in Katsuki's apartment. Oh my gosh, Ochako, the cold did affect you, the pink girl said to her friend. I know, he lamented. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's all the fool kacchan's fault. Well, from the things you tell me, it's not so stupid, hee hee. Mina laughed mischievously. Don't laugh, ha ha ha. Uraraka River. You don't know how I'm doing. Living with him is like living with a lion. I want to run away. But at the same time, I want to hug him and sleep warm next to him. I had gone from laughter to nostalgia. You're pretty bipolar, girl. Kacchan had already told me. The brunette said, without thinking. I can't believe you only think about Kacchan, Kacchan, Kacchan. Mina said, imitating her friend's voice. You know, it's too late. You should leave now, shouldn't you? Ochako said, annoyed. She didn't want her friend to bother her, especially with that subject. Ha ha ha. The truth is that yes. But you know they're just jokes, my friend. Ha 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 ha. Yes, of course, he said in an ironic tone. Being with the grumpy Bakugo for so long is making you just as grumpy as he is. The pink girl reproached her, earning an angry look from her friend. Ha ha ha, I'm quiet. Just let me tell you that if you want something you can take it. From what you tell me, apparently that lion is getting hungry. Ha ha. Mina, he scolded her. Don't talk like that. You're really a pervert. And I can't do anything either. If he doesn't like me and I do something, he might even throw me out of this place. No, I don't think so, Ashido said, taking her back. If I didn't want you here, knowing Bakugo, I would have already kicked you out. I wouldn't even have let you in at first. Kacchan is not so bad anymore. You'd be surprised at all the times I've bothered him, and he just arms himself with patience, ha ha ha. Ha ha, isn't it for something? Mina asked Uraraka, looking at her with narrowed eyes. Well, it's time to go. I have to get home. Goodbye, Mina. Let's see each other again one day. Today we couldn't go out because I got sick. Ochako said sadly. Don't worry, haha. How was the weekend? Her friend told her. I know a bar near my house that's great. You can go with Bakugo if you want. I'll go with my boyfriend. Eh? Do you have a boyfriend and you hadn't told me? I'd rather introduce them in person, the pink girl said. Well, Ochako, we're seeing each other. Take care of that cold. She said goodbye, hugging her friend, and left the room. Uraraka heard the door of the apartment close and sat there for a few minutes, sitting on the bed, clearing her mind. Did she really like Katsuki as she thought? Or was it just the effect of living together? Maybe helping her and having her there wasn't a good idea. Or maybe it was the best idea in the world. I didn't know what to think. It felt like when I was in high school. Why did I always have to have a hard time because of my feelings? I was sick of it. He got out of bed, no matter how tired he felt, and went to put on the kettle. He would have a big coffee to clear his mind. They were in the same alley as they had been a while ago, both lying on the ground, bruised, bleeding, bruised, and tired. It was already night, specifically 45 min. Kirishima sat down on the cold street and rubbed the back of his neck as he spoke to his friend. Old man. Katsuki could only emit a murmur. He was very tired and sore, and as best he could, he tried to sit down. You don't know how much I missed you, she said cheerfully, hugging him with one arm behind her back and pulling him closer. Arg, Katsuki complained. I have normal skin and muscles, you idiot, he yelled at him. The hug that the redhead gave him made even the smallest bowels hurt. Ha 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 ha, you don't change, Bakugo. You're still as grumpy as ever. Kirishima told him, happy. You'd be surprised at the patience I've had these days. Well, the last time I saw you, you still had that horrible bad temper. Do you really think I'm still the same after so long? The idiot of my boss literally forced me 1,000 times to learn to control, according to him, my strong temper, and only to be able to fuck me without exploding his fucking face. Ha 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 ha, oh yes, I remember, that guy was great. The red-haired man said, looking up at the sky. And if I was so cool, why did you leave me alone there? The blonde unscrupulous asked. Dude, that wasn't my thing. I love helping people, but I felt bad locking them up. We only lock up bad people, Katsuki said curtly. Even so, I couldn't. There are many more ways to help people. Kirishima stood up, reaching out to Bakugo to help him, who completely ignored her to stand up unaided. And running on a treadmill without moving is one of them. The explosive boy said, smiling sarcastically. Believe it or not, being overweight, diabetes, and many diseases are caused by poor physical condition. And you don't know how comfortable I feel there with those guys. I'm like a hero to them. The red-haired man smiled proudly, making the blonde's sarcastic smile become a real one. I'm glad you're well, my friend, Katsuki said, putting a hand on his former partner's shoulder. Well, who is the unlucky one? His friend asked him. Bakugo sighed. An idiot who talks, eats, and smiles too much. I didn't want to tell you that it was the brunette who lived in his house. Brother, I'm going to go crazy. Is my little Bakugo falling in love? The red-haired man told him, with hearts in his eyes and his hands folded. Katsuki hit him on the head lightly and yelled at him. Don't talk nonsense if you don't want to die. You don't have to be angry. At some point it had to happen, right? I wish not. Kirishima whistled. This is serious. We need the master of love with us. If you keep talking nonsense, I swear I'll tear you to pieces. The blonde gave him a murderous look. But now I must go, he said, looking at his phone. He hadn't realized the time. Yes, me too. Time flies by when you meet an old friend again, he said, smiling. Perhaps. You are gay? Katsuki asked, confused. What do you say? Can't I be happy to see my best friend? Kirishima shouted at him while Bakugo laughed. They both said goodbye, and the blonde went to his car, started the engine, and before walking, he wondered how Uraraka would be. Would she have survived alone all day? He stepped on the gas and headed home. He was going up the stairs to get to the door of his apartment when he put the key and turned it to enter. The first thing he saw was the brunette on a table full of papers. What the hell? He didn't finish speaking when Ochako interrupted him, almost throwing herself on top of him. Kacchan, he shouted at him, taking his face delicately. What have they done to you? You're all purple. Who did this? Get out, silly. Why are you always so cold? I had a little fight, he said, removing the girl's hands from his face, blushing a little when he touched them. They were so soft, and he subconsciously remembered when Uraraka put both hands on his face the night before. You're always very hot, and I demand to know what has happened to you, the brunette said, crossing her arms. I see you're feeling better. Katsuki tried to change the subject. What are you doing with all those papers? Ah? Ochako looked at the table. Ah, it's a surprise. Don't see. He put his hands over her eyes. Stop touching my face with your cold hands. I can't stand it. The blonde tried to get the girl's hands off his face, but she put them back on top of him. I promise I'll let you see if you'll help me. Yes, whatever. But take your hands off me or I'll kill you, Bakugo said angrily, now taking the girl's hands tightly. Do you know math? Uraraka asked, out of nowhere. PFFF, are you serious? I need help with some bills. The brunette took advantage of the fact that the blonde had her hands clasped to take him to the table. But when she sat down, Katsuki stood up the second, going to her room. Ochako stared at the door of the room. She thought that perhaps he did not want to help her, and her face reflected sadness. That made her clarify the doubts she had. That if it was a bad idea to have accepted the help of the blonde and go live together for a while. She was hurt by his indifference, and the desire to cry was already getting bigger. He looked at the leaves that were on his table, letting some tears appear, but holding them with all the strength in the world. He would not cry, and even less for the idiot Katsuki. He was in the middle of it when he felt someone sit next to him. She looked at the person, and from sadness her face went to shock. In front of her was Bakugo. She had gone to change clothes. Since the one she was wearing was all dirty, she had washed her face, removing the traces of blood, and was wearing reading glasses. Uraraka blushed so much that she looked as fast as she could at the leaves on the table, avoiding looking up for whatever reason. If the blonde always looked extremely good. With those glasses he looked even prettier. She didn't know if it was because of that intellectual touch they gave him, or because he would never have imagined it that way. Katsuki looked at her strangely. Is something wrong?
Nope.
Nothing, he said in a voice a little higher than usual. Okay, the boy replied curiously. Then what do you need from me? Uraraka closed her eyes tightly. She felt as if the blonde wanted to play with her. She didn't know if he was doing it on purpose, or she was the one thinking things that weren't happening. I need to do some math, the brunette said, without looking up. D? He asked. Then go yourself, he said, handing him some papers. Reading them, Bakugo could see that they were the papers for the formal resignation of the nightclub where Ochako worked. He smiled, showing all his teeth. But in the same second, he suppressed that smile, before the girl who was there with him noticed it. Yes, I was happy. I would never have to go back to that place, and better yet, I would never have to go back there to see the brunette dance in front of so many perverts. So what do you think, Kacchan? This time, Uraraka raised her head to look at him. I think it's great that you're leaving that place, Katsuki said, turning his head to look at her. You like the idea, huh? Ochako smiled broadly at him, making the blonde man's stomach churn. Of course, you won't have to lower yourself anymore. He didn't want to continue talking as he felt the heavy gaze of the brunette on top of him, about to give him a speech of morality, work, and dignity, like last time. Now he didn't feel like making her angry. See, great. He gave a thumbs up, trying to imitate his partner's face. But the result was something macabre that scared Uraraka. He said with a drop on his head. Well, then help me. I need to do a lot of math. I need to see how much money they should pay me for all the years I worked there, my vacations, and my last days worked. He said, listing things with his hands. Well, concentrate here, the blonde ordered. Not only would he help her, but he would take the opportunity to explain and teach her those basic things. From time to time, he looked at Ochako out of the corner of his eye. He saw her face as concentrated, and small smiles escaped him when he saw the girl's face when he got something wrong. When he finished all the calculations, he noticed how the brunette stretched out on the chair where she was sitting. Awa, math makes me sleepy, he said, yawning. I don't think it's math, angel-faced, Katsuki said. Have you seen the time? It's 3 a.m. What? It can't see her. Valuable time wasted just thinking about silly numbers, she said as she took her head and stood up from her seat. Silly, it's time to sleep. Bakugo finished, getting up from his chair and going to the armchair. Uraraka stared at him as he walked slowly to the blonde's room, went in and put on his pajamas, which consisted of a Katsuki t-shirt, sat on the bed, and thought for a moment before getting up again to open the door. Leaning against the frame, she noticed that the blonde was watching television. Why don't you sleep, Kacchan? It's too late. I'm not sleepy. This. I. Let it go, round face. Ochako stopped stuttering and took a deep breath. Don't you want to sleep with me today? Bakugo opened his eyes as wide as he could and turned from the armchair to look at the girl standing at the door of his room. What kind of jokes are those, silly dwarf? He asked, examining her with his eyes. I don't feel well, really, don't take it the wrong way, but I don't want to sleep alone. Besides, it's your bed. I don't feel comfortable watching you sleep on the couch if you're in your own home. Replied the blonde, turning again to look at the TV. I don't know. Uraraka didn't want to insist and entered the room without further ado. The explosive blonde only thought about the thousands of ways to tell him that he needed to sleep in his bed the night before he could sleep well after so many days, and not to mention the comfortable company that was in it. He thought about it for a while and turned off the television to leave that cold living room. He stood up, and with all the little shame he entered the room. The brunette slept peacefully, making Katsuki soften. The best thing about her, after her smile, was seeing her sleep, so calm, so quiet, without her being making her damn jokes, or talking about the many idiocies she always talked about. He settled next to her, on the side to which he had his back to avoid contact, and prepared to sleep. But not before kissing the back of her head. Rest, Uraraka, she said without further ado, and after a while she fell asleep, not realizing that the brunette was awake. Good evening, Kacchan, he said almost in a whisper, so he could fall asleep. Bakugo didn't want to wake up. He was so comfortable. He was warm, and again, he felt that sleeping in his bed was like sleeping on a cloud. Maybe it was because he didn't have to wake up with the sound of an alarm, or maybe because of the good company. Good company. He opened his eyes quickly and realized that he was lying upwards and next to him, more precisely on his chest. Uraraka slept peacefully. He made a surprised face. How did they get to that position if he lay almost on the shore so as not to accidentally touch the brunette? Even worse, she looked very comfortable on top of him and even had him hugging him with one arm. Oh, and that couldn't be all. He was hugging her too. He had an arm going around Ochako's neck, as if he had intended to pull her to him. What the fuck had happened? Katsuki calmed down a little. The girl continued with her typical pajamas, and he with his clothes, all good. Nothing had happened that he could regret. He tried to get out of bed without waking the brunette. Something like when he was an undercover policeman. He had to be careful. Wait, why did I have to be careful? The girl, wake up and stop slacking. He looked at her angrily, but his face relaxed and blushed a little when he saw the peaceful expression she had while she slept. He slapped his forehead. Since when was he so soft? He took off the shirt he was wearing to wash it, and went to the bathroom to wash his face and teeth. Apparently sleeping with Uraraka had not been such a good idea. He went into the bathroom and washed his face well, about 5 times. He took his toothbrush and put it in his mouth. He brushed his teeth for 10 seconds when suddenly he heard the doorbell. He thought who it could be, and there was no other option than the postman. So he left it like that and continued brushing his teeth. Hello? What do you want? The blonde heard that voice that he would recognize anywhere, and all his senses were alert. So he peeked out the door to see what that girl was up to. I'm bringing this telegram to, said the postman, without looking at the girl in front of him. Bakugo Katsu, Kai, he finished saying, looking up to see the brunette. She was disheveled. She still didn't wash her face. She yawned while rubbing one eye, and she was still wearing her friend's giant t-shirt. But despite being like this, she looked very cute and sexy. Katsuki noticed the postman's face and his fury increased. He saw how he passed a piece of paper to Ochako, and how he tried to touch the girl's hand when he passed it to her and rushed to the door, taking the brunette by the waist and putting her behind him, just as he did when Mina harassed her with his huge pubis. You damn depraved, do you want to die? He said, pointing at him. still with a toothbrush in his mouth and with his face in a mess. It was not even necessary to ask him what was wrong. It was a matter of seeing his expression. He was really, huh? The postman got all the hair standing on end. Hello? Katsuki again heard Yuraraka's voice inside the apartment. He glanced sideways at where she was to realize that she was talking on the phone. He looked again at the postman to send him flying. But something clicked in his head at that moment. Yuraraka Ochako. It's a pleasure to hear your voice again. Jajaj? I hope you remember me. The blonde boss said on the other end of the phone. Yes, I remember his voice very well. Unfortunately, I only know that he is the boss of Kacchan, and I don't know his name. The girl said in a sad tone. Katsuki foamed at the girl. First she goes and opens the door to the first person she knocks on. And why talk about the fact that she hadn't even dressed for that? And now she is able to take her phone and answer her boss. Oh, how unconscious of mine. You can call me Masaki. The chief replied happily. Masaki, what a nice name, the brunette said. Oh, you're a sweetheart little girl. I'm glad my little Katsuki is with you. I sent you a telegram a while ago. Did you get it? Yes, I'm reading it right now. Great. Well, see you tonight then. It will be an honor to meet you, Yuraraka. Call me Ochako, sir. The girl replied energetically. But before the guy on the other end of the phone could answer her, Bakugo took the cell phone from her forcefully, hanging up the call while exploding the cell phone in her hand with an explosion. Damn wretched dwarf. Why do you open my door and answer my phone without any shame? I'll kill you now. Kacchan. The girl shouted angrily, frowning and putting her hands on her waist. First, I'm not deaf. You shouldn't yell at me. Second, I was your boss, and apparently he wanted to talk to me, not you. And why the fuck do you think he'd want to talk to you if he was calling me? The blonde interrupted her. Don't you dare interrupt me again. The angriest girl told him, making Katsuki lower her guard a little. No one had ever responded to him like that, or had the balls to face him. I'm telling you this because he spoke to me very well. And third, it's very rude not to open the door to someone who comes to your house. Yuraraka had a very furrowed brow. The only time Bakugo had seen her so angry was years ago, when they faced each other at the sports festival. Even though she was a fool and knew that what she said to him was not coherent, he understood her. It must be difficult to stay calm and happy always. Good, the blonde told him. Well, is that all you'll tell me? And what else do you want me to tell you, round face? Do you want to keep picking a fight with me? I'll never be able to understand you, Kacchan. The girl said, turning to go to the bedroom to change clothes. And by the way, Masaki sent you this. She threw the sheet in the air. She didn't want to pass it to the blonde in her hand. If he could be an idiot, then she could too. Katsuki went and grabbed the letter. It was from his boss, and he was inviting him to an event that same day in the evening. Since a famous lawyer was going to give a lecture, he remembered that his boss had told him about it a few weeks ago. But if he remembered correctly, the talk it would be at the police station, not in an event hall as the letter said. But the worst was yet to come. At the end of the telegram you could read it as mandatory to come to the event with a companion. Remember that you always have to prevent, and it will always be convenient to have a friend to testify in case of anything. His boss was a great idiot. He knew that he had done it on purpose. A few minutes passed and Ochako left the room with a skirt and a t-shirt on. She was heading to the bathroom to comb her hair and wash her face, still with a frown. Oi, round face, he called her, but received no answer in return. Hey, don't ignore me when I talk to you, he said angrily. He was already marking a vein on his head, and the bridge of his nose was beginning to wrinkle. When he had no answer, he stood up and went to the bathroom to face the girl, opening the door violently. What do you think you're doing, idiot? Katsuki bit his tongue so as not to respond by blowing his head off. We must go buy you a dress. At night we have to go out. Huh? Ochako left her frown in oblivion, now making an expression of amazement. Oh, what do you want to get to with that? Is it a joke, kacchan? He got angry again. I won't repeat it. My stupid boss wants me to go with you to a stupid fucking lawyer's conference, and it's my obligation to go with you. I'm very fucked up right now. So fix it, and let's go now. Uraraka blinked curiously. She was sure she had heard wrong. A few minutes ago, the blonde wanted to kill her, and now he was asking her out. I don't like those jokes, kacchan. And I don't need a dress either. That's what I have the most. It's not a fucking joke. And you won't go with one of those suits. We'll go for a decent one. Ochako gave him a murderous look. The blonde knew that if he wanted the brunette to listen to him, he had to treat her differently. So he left the bathroom angry, going to his armchair to have a glass of whiskey and cool his mind. A while passed and Uraraka came out of the bathroom. She stayed there thinking that Katsuki told her that it had been her boss who was forcing him to go with her to a conference. He told her very angrily, and she was making everything more difficult for him. She also understood that he was an idiot, and he would never understand that what she did before was just another job. But I wouldn't ask more of a man with an attitude like Bakugu's. She saw him in the armchair lying down and approached him. She was going to tell him that she agreed to accompany him and go buy the dress he wanted. But when she saw him in front of him, she found him sleeping with his mouth open and snoring as if nothing had happened. She noticed the glass of whiskey on the floor and assumed that she had fallen asleep drinking it. JJJ, a short river. Kacchan looks very funny when he sleeps like that. She took the glass off the floor and took it to the kitchen. Then she went to the blonde's room to get some towels. She would take a good shower. She never got angry, so she had to calm her mind a little. Katsuki opened her eyes. How much had she slept? She looked for her cell phone to see the time. It can't be, he screamed loudly. It was 7 p.m. He had slept all damn day, and Uraraka wasn't even able to wake him up. I have 3 hours left to convince the idiot angel face to accompany her and go buy her a dress. Get ready and arrive. Fucking shit. How I hate living. He lamented. He stood up and quickly started looking for the brunette, went to his room and did not find her, but realized that the bathroom light was on. He went there and opened the door without even knocking. Stupid round face, because you don't wake me up. She couldn't finish the sentence. Ochako was in front of the mirror trying to comb her hair, and when she felt the door being opened, she turned around. She was lightly made up. She had a soft eyeliner, and the blonde didn't understand how her eyelashes had grown so much, making her eyes look bigger than they already were, and also making her look more tender than normal. She was wearing a black dress that was not so extravagant. It had slumped shoulders and reached a little above the knee, but it was tight and made the girl's curves stand out as she had never seen them, and her heels, also black, had a small pink on top. Bakugu examined her from head to toe before he could finish what he wanted to say. Well, the best time of day is when you're sleeping, kacchan. Uraraka said, laughing, annoying him. Apparently his anger had already passed. So the blonde avoided any response to what she said to avoid any mishap. So, will you come with me, angel face? The boy asked her. She had to control herself a little. She was already feeling how the blood was running down her nose. No, obviously I wore my most decent dress to go to the market. Silly. Ochako rolled her eyes. And you? Go wash your face. You still have slime stuck to you. Bakugu returned to reality at what he said and ran his hand over his face. If it was true that he still had slime, that would be so embarrassing. He left the bathroom to go to his room to put on his suit and comb his hair. He also had to think of something so that his boss wouldn't with him for the rest of his life after that night. There were already 30 minutes left to get to the place where the event would be held, and they still did not leave the apartment. Uraraka spent a long time trying to comb her hair properly according to her, and Katsuki only wanted to enter the bathroom to play the one. But the girl never came out. I hope you're happy, round face, Bakugu said angrily as they went down to the parking lot of the building where they lived. Well, I'm happy. Kacchan asked me out, haha. She laughed to annoy him. Grrr, you're looking for a horrible death. You stupid one. The blonde growled at him. They got into the car and Katsuki almost broke the throttle to get to the place as quickly as possible. Kacchan, don't drive so fast. It's very dangerous. The brunette told him, making him remember the day he hit her, making him take a little force off the accelerator. You're getting less clumsy, huh? What do you mean by that? Nothing. Forget it, idiot. Katsuki finished telling her. Apparently the girl was starting to be more careful. He turned on the radio and put on music to make his trip more enjoyable. When we arrived at the place, the brunette was impressed. It was all very beautiful, and everyone was very well dressed. Kacchan, Ochako called him, making him look at her as soon as she got out of his vehicle. Am I in agreement with everything? He asked, raising his arms. They all look very pretty. I don't want to overshadow you. The blonde man was tender. She didn't even imagine how beautiful and sexy she looked. She even bothered him that any idiot dared to look at her with desire or something. He would kill them all if necessary. What are you talking about, silly? You look good. Now come here. Let's get out of this quickly. He took her hand, and they entered the room in front of them. He had to look for his boss. He wanted explanations, and at some point he had to introduce him to Uraraka to end his suffering as soon as possible. Inside, everything was very tidy and decorated. There was an open bar that caught the attention of the blonde and the brunette. Among all the people, it would be difficult to find Misaki. So what better idea than for him to find them? Round-faced. He called her, and she looked at him. Are you thinking the same as me? He asked, nodding to the bar. Oh yes, Ochako said, raising his arms. Free alcohol. And now it was she who was taking him by the hand to go to that place. It had been a while, and they had drunk a couple of beers each. Nothing out of the ordinary. Here you are, my elusive star boy. A familiar voice behind Bakugo said. He turned around to find the owner of that voice. Oh boss, we were looking for him. The blonde man said, getting up from his seat to greet him. If you're not on duty, you can call me Misaki, Katsuki Jojo, and tell me, where's your girl? It's not my girl, sir, he said angrily. Well, not yet, haha. Uraraka replied from behind him. Mr. Misaki, he shouted when he saw the guy, running to greet him. We finally meet, it's an honor. Thank you for keeping this city at peace, he said with his best smile. Katsuki covered his face. That girl would drive him crazy, and if he lost his job because of her, this time he would really kill her. Uraraka, I knew that my right hand had very good taste. You are very pretty, the boss told him. The honor is mine. They were both laughing, and Katsuki just wanted the earth to swallow him. My dear, will you let me talk to the grumpy man for a moment? Yes, of course. The brunette looked at the blonde man behind her, trying to hide. He went to him to tell him that his boss wanted to talk to him, and while they were at it, he stayed at the bar. What happened, sir? Bakugo asked Misaki. Well, I need you to meet the lawyer who will come today. He's a great guy. Out of 20 cases, he wins 19. The idea is that my best policeman befriends him or something, and thus have him on our side. Even if we never lock up anyone who is not innocent, it's always good to have the best, so that the damned rot in jail. Well, but I don't assure you anything. If he's an idiot, I'll kill him. Today you won't kill anyone. After he speaks on stage, I want you to look for him and do what you have to do. Copy, boss. I'll do my best, the blonde man told him, bumping his fists with the man. And hey, he added something else, putting on a Katsuki face I'd never seen. She's very cute. Don't be an idiot, or I'll fire you. Bakugo got goosebumps. But he still went to the bar and sat down next to the girl. What's the matter, Kacchan? She asked, drinking a glass of mojito. Nothing. Don't worry, round-faced, he answered. Oi, he called the bartender. Give me a whiskey with 3 ices. Remember that we have to drive back. I promise not to do it if you don't either. Uraraka said, smiling at him. Katsuki felt that his mind went crazy when she smiled at him like that. It made him want to hit her in the face so that she wouldn't do it again. But at the same time, it made him want to take her and kiss her until they couldn't breathe. That was very wrong. I know. This will definitely be my last drink, he said, receiving it. Ha, if that's the case, it's also my last drink. Cheers for that, she shouted excitedly, clinking glasses. They were talking and laughing with some of the blonde's co-workers, when suddenly Ochako noticed something that he didn't like at all. In front of them, in another group, he noticed a head with red and white hair. It must definitely be them. He squeezed Bakugu's arm subconsciously, causing Bakugu to stand guard. Uraraka, he called her. He noticed that the girl was looking at a fixed point with a worried face while squeezing the boy's arm. Do you feel well? No, she replied coldly. Let's get out of here, please. This time she looked at him, and he could see the plea in her eyes. He took her hand, and without asking anything, he began to walk to the exit of the place. But suddenly he felt someone calling him. Kacchan? It was the voice he least wanted to hear. The stupid voice of the idiot who fucked up his life in his childhood and adolescence. The idiot who did everything right, and who thought he could be better than him. He was the idiot Deku. He tried to ignore him, walking faster, but called him back. Kacchan, it's me, Midoriya, the boy said, this time approaching him and taking the blonde man. Katsuki turned, with his angry face. He was the only person he didn't want to meet again in his life. And fate was so fucking to put him right there, where he had to fulfill a mission. What do you want, idiot? He yelled, turning to look at the green-haired man. Kacchan, it's me, Deku, the happy boy told him. Yes, I know you idiot. Don't call me Kacchan again, or I'll kill you right here. What the fuck do you want? Huh? I just wanted to say hello. I haven't seen you in years. You look great, Izuku said while smiling. I found out that you are a very well-known policeman. Do. Midoriya couldn't help but slur her words when she saw the girl who was almost hidden behind the blonde. Uraraka, it's you, the black-haired man asked, moving to see if it was her. Hello, Deku, Ochako said happily. Wow, I never thought I'd see you again. Look at you. You're so big. Bakugu noticed the girl's mood change and was confused. She was really very bipolar. But she remembered how she got the last time she asked about the black-haired idiot, and something didn't add up. Yes, ha ha ha, I've grown a lot. Now I'm a lawyer, and today it's my turn to give a talk in this place, Izuku said, alerting the blonde man. What? Are you the fucking lawyer? Katsuki asked angrily. Kacchan, don't call it that. The brunette reproached him. Ha 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 ha, don't worry, Uraraka. But you do, Kacchan. I'm a lawyer and well, I think I'm the lawyer you're referring to. Hee hee, Midoriya said, rubbing the back of her neck shyly. Is something wrong, Izuku? Are you getting into trouble again? Of course not, Todoroki. Do you remember Kacchan and Uraraka? The black-haired man moved so that the red and white-haired boy could see and greet the newly named. Of course, how can you forget Uraraka? He said as he greeted her. And she, who hadn't taken her hands off Bakugu's arm, greeted him shyly, giving the blonde more grip. He felt that, and when he looked at Ochako, he noticed her face of discomfort. Something was happening there, and he did not plan to stay, so that she would feel uncomfortable. Well, what a nice reunion. We have to go. Let's go round-faced, he said, taking his hand, trying to move. Bakugu waits, Shouto said. Are they leaving yet? If the party is still starting. That's true, Izuku said this time. Let's have a drink so that they can tell me about you. By the way, what are you doing here together? I would swear that Kacchan hated everyone. Lol. Don't talk about me like you know me, you nerd, Katsuki yelled at her. He wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. He didn't want the brunette to feel uncomfortable. The fact that he had accompanied him was something he didn't expect, so it wasn't in his plans to make her feel bad. I'm going to kill you, you idiot, he said, pulling small sparks from his hands, causing Todoroki to stand in front of Midoriya. Dare to do something to him, and everything will burn down here, he said quietly. Do you think I'm afraid of you, half and half bastard? Bakugo asked, smiling. You should. Shouto finished, but Izuku moved him from behind. You shouldn't do this here, Shu. The black-haired man calmed him down. Kacchan is right. How about we go get a few beers? Ochako also tried to calm the blonde down. Yes, it's a good idea, Izuku said. Come on. He came out from behind Todoroki and took his arm to go to the bar. Katsuki looked at Uraraka as the other pair walked away, as if asking him what the fuck was going on. But she just looked at him and smiled, holding his hand to go to the bar. Sitting there, Ochako and Midoriya were talking briskly about anything, while Bakugo and Todoroki were quietly drinking. And Deku, tell me, what was it like to meet Endeavor as a father-in-law? Ha ha ha. The brunette laughed and the black-haired man blushed, but someone else heard that. The blonde spat out all the drink he had in his mouth. What did you just say, round face? I expected to have heard wrong. Don't fuck with me, Deku. You and the idiot in the half and half are bitches. The girl elbowed him under the table. Watch your words, Kacchan. He reproached him. Haha, I don't know if that's the right word, but Midoriya didn't know how to say it. Yes, Bakugo. Izuku and I are boyfriend and girlfriend. Does that matter to you? Shouto replied on the other side of the table. Katsuki was rubbing his stomach, where his dear friend had beaten him. Now he understood everything. The stupid Todoroki was as gay as Deku. And it was more than obvious that Uraraka was slobbering over him, black-haired nerd. Todoroki made him super gay and stole him. It all made sense now.